I remember that night like it was etched into the back of my eyelids. The kind of memory that creeps up on you when you're alone in the dark, making your skin prickle even years later. It was late fall. The leaves on the Blue Ridge had turned that fiery red and orange, but by midnight, everything was swallowed up in shadow and fog. I'd been up in Boone visiting my aunt. She's getting on in years, lives in one of those old cabins tucked away in the hollers, the sort where the wind whistles through the cracks like it's trying to tell you something. She wasn't doing well, had taken a fall, and I'd driven up to check on her, bring some groceries, sit and listen to her stories about the old days. You know how it is in these mountains. Family pulls you back, no matter how far you've wandered. The drive back south on the Parkway was one I'd made countless times since I was a kid. My folks used to take us camping along those ridges, pitching tents in the overlooks where you could see the valley stretch out like a rumpled quilt under the stars. Back then it felt magical, but as I got older, I started to appreciate the quiet menace of it all, the way the road twists and turns, hugging the mountainside with nothing but a flimsy guardrail between you and a drop that could swallow a truck whole. That night, I left Boone around 10, figuring I'd beat the weekend traffic and get home to my place in Asheville before the wee hours. The radio was on low, some classic country station fading in and out as the signal bounced off the peaks. Johnny Cash was crooning about walking the line, his voice gravelly and distant, like he was singing from the bottom of a well. The fog started rolling in about halfway down, the kind that's thick as soup, clinging to the asphalt and making the headlights cut sharp beams that didn't illuminate much beyond a few feet. I slowed to 30, maybe 25 in spots, gripping the wheel of my old Ford pickup a little tighter. The Parkway's not for speeding anyway. It's a scenic route, meant for daytime tourists gawking at the views. At night, it's different, lonely, like the mountains are watching you, breathing down your neck. I hadn't seen another car for miles, which wasn't unusual that late, but it added to the isolation. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the occasional rustle of wind through the trees lining the road. That's when I first noticed them. At first, it was just a flicker in the rearview mirror, 2 pinpoints of light piercing the fog behind me. I figured it was another driver, maybe someone like me, heading south after a long day. But as the minutes ticked by, something felt off. They weren't gaining on me, weren't falling back either. No matter if I eased off the gas or pushed it a bit, those lights stayed fixed, like they were tethered to my tailgate by an invisible string. I adjusted the mirror, thinking maybe it was a reflection or my eyes playing tricks from the fatigue setting in. But no, they were there, steady, about 100 yards back, far enough that I couldn't make out the shape of the vehicle, but close enough to be a constant presence. I tried not to think much of it at first. These roads can play with your head. The curves make distances deceptive, and the fog distorts everything. But as I wound through another series of switchbacks, I realized the beams weren't casting right on the pavement. Normal headlights would throw light forward, illuminating the road between us, but these seemed to hover, diffused in the mist, like they were suspended higher than a sedan's roof. And there was a subtle wobble to them, not like the steady bounce of tires on uneven asphalt, but more erratic, as if whatever was carrying them wasn't quite sure of the ground beneath it. I glanced at the clock on the dash, 12:15 now, and felt a little knot form in my stomach. The Parkway was dead empty otherwise, no taillights ahead, no oncoming glare from the northbound lane, just me and those persistent eyes in the mirror. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a trucker with high beams, or some tourist in an RV taking it slow. But the unease started to build, slow and insidious, like water seeping into cracks. I'd heard stories growing up, the kind folks tell around campfires in these parts, tales of lights in the woods that aren't what they seem, luring hikers off trails or following cars until they run out of gas. My grandpa used to talk about the ghost lights up near Brown Mountain, how they dance and chase, never explained by science or reason. He said they were the spirits of lost Cherokee warriors, or maybe something older, tied to the band itself. I never believed it much. I'm a practical man, working construction, dealing concrete and steel. But out there alone, with the fog pressing in, those old yarns start whispering in your ear. To shake the feeling, I sped up a touch, pushing 40 where the road straightened out a bit. The lights kept pace, neither closing the gap nor widening it. Then I slowed, dropping to 20, and still, they mirrored me perfectly. It was like they were reading my mind, anticipating every move. My palms started sweating on the wheel, and I cracked the window for some fresh air, but all that came in was the chill dampness of the night, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. The radio signal dipped again, Johnny fading into static, and I switched him off, preferring the silence.
but the quiet only amplified the hum of my tires and the distant call of an owl somewhere in the trees, eerie, like a warning. By now, we'd been like this for 20 minutes, maybe more. The overlooks were passing by, empty pull-offs with signs for vistas that were pitch black this time of night. I decided to test it, pull over and let them pass. There's one spot I know well, a wide gravel lot with a view of the Linville Gorge, though you couldn't see a damn thing in the fog. I signaled, even though there was no one to see, and eased off the road, killing the engine but leaving the lights on. The headlights behind me slowed too, coming to a stop right in the middle of the pavement, maybe 50 feet back. They just sat there, beams cutting through the mist toward my truck, but not illuminating any details of what was behind them. No silhouette of a car, no glint off metal. Just the lights, hovering. I waited, heart starting to thud heavier in my chest. A minute passed, then two. No movement. No engine revving to pass. No doors opening or footsteps crunching on the gravel. The fog swirled between us, thick and opaque, like a curtain drawn to hide whatever was out there. I locked my doors, though it felt foolish, and stared into the rear view, willing something to happen. Then, without warning, the lights blinked out. Completely. 1 second they were there, piercing the night, and then, gone. Darkness rushed in, the kind that's absolute in these mountains, unbroken except for my own headlights reflecting off the fog. I strained my ears, but there was no sound of an engine turning off, no click of a switch, just the wind sighing through the trees, and my own breathing, shallow and quick. I sat there longer than I should have, maybe 5 minutes, 10. The rational part of me said to drive on, that it was just some prankster or a glitch in perception. But the other part, the one raised on these hills, felt the dread pulling in my gut like cold water. What if they were still there, lights off, waiting? For what? I thought about getting out, shining my flashlight back there, but the idea sent a shiver down my spine. These woods aren't kind to the curious. People go missing up here every year. Hikers, drivers, folks who pull over and never pull out again. Stories of feral people living off the grid, descendants of old settlers gone wild, watching from the trees. Or worse, things that aren't people at all, but echoes of something forgotten. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life, and eased back onto the parkway. My eyes flicked to the mirror immediately, and there they were, those damn lights, flickering back on as if they'd never left, but closer now, maybe 30 yards back. The glare was brighter, almost blinding in the mirror, forcing me to tilt it up. Still no shape, no vehicle outline, just the twin orbs floating in the void. My throat tightened, and I pressed the gas, the truck lurching forward as I climbed back to speed. The road curved sharply ahead, the guardrail blurring by, and I took it a little too fast, tires squealing faintly on the damp asphalt. That's when the radio came to life on its own. I turned it off earlier, but now static crackled through the speakers, loud and abrasive, like nails on a chalkboard. I reached to shut it off, but before my fingers touched the knob, the static cleared, just for a second, and a voice emerged. Not a DJ, not a song. A man's voice, low and raspy, whispering numbers. 1, 2, 3. Slow, deliberate, like he was counting steps in the dark. My blood ran cold. I smacked the power button, but it didn't stop. The voice kept going. 4, 5. I twisted the dial, scanning stations, but it followed, overlaying whatever faint signals were there. 6, 7. I hit the gas harder, the engine roaring as I pushed 50, the fog whipping past like ghosts. The counting sped up, matching my pace. 8, 9, 10, 11. The words blurring together. Urgent now. Behind me, the lights kept going, unwavering, their wobble more pronounced, like whatever helped them was struggling but determined. I slowed experimentally, dropping to 30, and the voice struck out. 12, 13. Deliberate again. It was synced to me, somehow, like the thing back there was inside my head, playing with my fear. Panic started to set in for real. The parkway stretched on, miles of twisting blacktop with no exits, no towns, just the endless ridge. I thought about my phone, but service is spotty up here. I checked earlier. No bars. The voice droned on, counting higher. 20, 21. And I imagined what it might be tallying. Steps toward me, seconds until something happened. Lives lost on this road. My mind raced to those old legends again. The Brown Mountain Lights, sure, but also tales of the followers, spectral hitchhikers or worse, entities that attach to the lonely traveler, feeding on their isolation until they break. The curves came faster now, the truck swaying as I pushed it. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill, and my hands ached from gripping the wheel. The lights were even closer, their glare filling the cab, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. I could almost feel a presence, like eyes boring into the back of my head, not just watching but knowing my route, my fears, my regrets. Why me? Was it random, or had I stirred something by being out here alone? The voice hit 30, then 40, speeding with me as I floored it around a bend, the guardrail inches away. Hours seemed to pass like that, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. The counting reached into the hundreds, a relentless murmur that burrowed into my skull. Finally, the signs for the Asheville access road appeared, the fog thinning as the elevation dropped. Streetlights flickered into view ahead, sodium yellow cutting through the mist. Civilization. Safety. As I merged onto the ramp, the lights behind me vanished. Poof. Gone like they'd been snuffed out. The radio fell silent mid-number, static dying to nothing. I didn't stop until I was home. Doors locked, lights on in every room. Sleep. Forget it. I paced, replayed it all, questioning my sanity. The next day, hands still shaking, I pulled the dashcam footage. Front camera showed the road as I remembered. Foggy. Empty. But the rear, nothing. No car. No truck. Just two floating points of light, bobbing slightly, keeping perfect pace. They winked out at the pull-off, reappeared closer, followed until the end. No shape, no source.
I don't talk about that night much. Not because I think folks won't believe me, but because saying it out loud makes it feel like I'm inviting whatever it was back into my life. It happened 3 winters ago, coming up on 4 now, on a stretch of the Blue Ridge Parkway that I'd driven more times than I can count. I know every curve, every overlook, every mile marker from Cherokee clear up to Waynesboro. My daddy taught me to drive on that road, and I've hauled everything from firewood to furniture along. It's home to me, or it was. That night changed things. I'd been up in Roanoke for work, laying hardwood floors in a big old house that some city folks were fixing up as a vacation place. Good money, but it meant long days and late nights cleaning up so I could head home. By the time I hit the Parkway southbound, it was pushing midnight, maybe a little after. The sky was clear overhead, stars sharp as broken glass. But down low, the fog was starting to pool in the valleys, the way it does when cold air slides off the ridges. Temperature had dropped hard after sunset. My truck's thermometer read 22 degrees, and the heater was blowing just warm enough to keep the windshield clear. I had the radio on quiet, some old gospel station that fades in and out depending on which side of the mountain you're on, and a thermos of coffee that had gone lukewarm hours ago. The road was empty, like it usually is that late in winter. Tourists don't come up this high when there's ice on the rocks, and locals know better than to be out unless they have to. I was tired, bone tired, the kind where your eyes want to close for just a second and you have to shake your head to stay sharp. But I've driven tired before. You learn to keep your focus on the white line, count the reflectors, anything to stay in the moment. I was somewhere south of Peaks of Otter, rolling along steady at 45 when I first saw him. Mile marker 312.3. I remember it clear because I glanced down at the odometer right as my headlights caught the figure. He was standing on the right shoulder, just past the marker, facing away from the road like he was looking into the trees. Dark coat, dark pants, boots maybe, hard to tell in the quick sweep of light. Tall, but not unusually so, hands hanging loose at his sides. I eased off the gas a little, the way you do when you see somebody walking the parkway at night. It's not common, but it happens. Hikers who misjudge daylight, folks whose cars broke down, sometimes somebody who's had too much and decided walking is better than driving. I thought about stopping. Lord knows I've picked up strangers before. These mountains teach you to help when you can, because one day it might be you needing the ride. But something held me back. Maybe it was how still he was, not shifting weight, not turning to flag me down, not even rocking against the cold, just standing, like a signpost somebody dressed up for a joke. My headlights washed over him fully as I got closer, and he didn't react at all. No flinch, no squint, nothing. I passed him doing maybe 35, close enough that the light should have lit his back clear as day, and still no movement. I watched in the side mirror as he shrank behind me. The fog was thicker down in that little dip, so he disappeared quick, but not before I saw it. His head turned toward me. Not a slow turn, not a natural one. It snapped around too far, like an owl or something that doesn't have the same bones we do. The angle was wrong, way past what a neck should allow, and he was facing me dead on now, though I was already 50 yards past. I couldn't make out features, just pale oval where face should be, but I felt the stare hit me like cold water down my spine. I told myself it was imagination, that the mirror distorts things, that fog plays tricks, but my foot pressed harder on the gas anyway. The road climbed again, winding up toward the next ridge. I tried to shake it off, took a swallow of the cold coffee, turned the radio up a little. Mahalia Jackson was singing about trouble in this world, her voice strong and steady, the kind that usually steadies me too, but it didn't help much. My eyes kept flicking to the mirrors, expecting, I don't know what. Taillights? Nothing.
just empty black ribbon behind me. A mile or so later, maybe 313.1, close enough that it stuck in my head, I came around a gentle bend, and there he was again. Same side of the road, same posture, hands at sides, facing away into the trees. My stomach dropped. I slowed without thinking, almost to a crawl, headlights pinning him in place. Dark coat, same cut, same stillness. I stared hard, trying to find differences. Maybe a different build, different height, anything to prove this was another man altogether. But it was him. I knew it the way you know your own reflection. Same everything. I crept past, holding my breath like a kid sneaking by a graveyard. This time I didn't look in the mirror right away. I couldn't. I kept my eyes front, knuckles wide on the wheel, waiting for the curve to take him out of sight. When I finally risked a glance, he was already watching me. Not turned this time. He'd been facing my direction from the start, waiting. The pale blur of his face tracked my truck smooth and steady. No hurry, no expression I could read. Just looking. The fog curled around his legs like it belonged there. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. No signal bars, but it buzzed anyway. A weird static pop. I grabbed it, thumbed the screen. No service like I expected up high, but the GPS app was frozen. The little blue dot that marks me had stopped moving, stuck back at mile 312, blinking like it was confused. I tapped it, closed the app, opened it again, same thing. Map wouldn't load, just gray grid and that frozen dot. I set the phone down carefully like it might bite, and tried to laugh it off. Electronics act funny in the cold, right? Altitude messes with satellites, normal stuff. But it wasn't normal. Nothing about that night was. The road kept winding, higher and colder, frost starting to feather the edges of the windshield where the defroster couldn't quite reach. Every reflective sign I passed, the green mile markers, the yellow curve warnings, looked for a split second like a tall figure standing at the roadside before the light hit it right and it turned back into metal. I started anticipating them, heart jumping each time, then sinking when it was nothing. My mind was playing its own game now, seeing him where he wasn't. I don't know how long I drove like that, 10 minutes, 15, before the third sighting. I just come out of a series of tight S-curves, the kind that make you lean with the truck when the road straightened for a rare half-mile stretch. Fog was thinner here, pooled lower, so visibility was better. And there he was again, closer this time, not on the shoulder anymore. Toes right at the fog-white edge line, almost on the asphalt. Same code, same stance, facing away. My foot lifted off the gas entirely. The truck slowed to 20, 15. I could see details now. The code was old wool, maybe navy surplus, dark enough to drink the light, boots heavy, scuffed, no hat, hair dark and lang against the collar. I didn't want to pass him again. Every instinct screamed to floor it, to blow by and not look back. But I was going slow already in something, curiosity, stupidity. That mountain politeness my mama drilled into me made me roll the window down a crack as I drew level. Cold air rushed in, sharp with pine and frozen earth. Hey, I called, voice cracking worse than I wanted. You need help, it's too cold to be out here. Nothing, not a twitch. He stood like he was carved from the night itself. I was 10 feet away now, close enough that the fog wasn't moving around him the way it should. No swirl from my exhaust, no shift from the wind. It just hung there, still as he was. I sped up then, not dramatic, just firm on the gas until I was doing 50 again. The truck lurched forward, and as I passed, I looked. One quick glance I swore would be the last. His head was turned toward me already, that impossible angle again. Face still a pale smudge, but closer now, clear enough to see there was something wrong with it. Not deformed, not monstrous, just blank. Like someone had started to shape a man from clay and quit before adding eyes, nose, mouth. Indistinct, yet watching all the same. That's when I heard the knock. Soft, deliberate, from inside the cab. Backseat, passenger side window. Tap, tap, tap. Like fingernails asking to be let in or let out. I didn't look back, I couldn't. My eyes locked on the road, foot slamming the accelerator until the old truck groaned at 65 on a road posted for 35. The knock didn't come again, but the air changed. Got heavier, thicker, like someone had cracked a window to a colder place. The heater still blew warm, but it didn't reach me anymore. I felt breath on the back of my neck that wasn't mine. Slow, ancient, waiting. The rest of the drive is fractured in my memory. I know I passed the Thunder Ridge overlook without stopping. No, I flew by the James River Visitor Center turnoff doing 80 on straights I usually take at 40. The GPS never unfroze, the dot stayed stuck miles behind me. Phone never got signal again until I hit 81 south of Buena Vista. But the whole way, another hour at least, I felt the weight in the truck with me. Not bumping the seat, not moving, just present. Like an extra passenger who didn't need a seatbelt, didn't cast a shadow, didn't breathe loud enough to hear over the engine, but you knew was there all the same. I didn't stop until I was off the parkway entirely, down in civilization where there's streetlights and late-night gas stations. Pulled into the sheets in Lexington with every light on my truck blazing. Sat there with the engine running till dawn started graying the sky. Only then did I look in the back seat. Empty, of course. No footprints on the frosted windows, no fog from breath, nothing out of place. But the cab still felt crowded. I've driven the parkway in daylight plenty since then, even at dusk a few times, but never after full dark. And when I pass mile marker 312.3, I don't look at the shoulder. I keep my eyes front, radio off, windows up, because some nights when the fog sits low and the cold bites hard, I swear I feel that weight settle in again, just for a second, as I go by, like he's still waiting, patient, knowing one night I'll be tired enough, or polite enough, or just human enough to stop, and I don't know what happens after that. I don't want to know. But sometimes when I'm home alone and the wind rattles the windows, I hear it, soft, deliberate, from somewhere deeper in the house than it should be. Tap, tap, tap.
I've always loved the Blue Ridge Parkway at night, or at least I used to. There's something about the way the road winds, quiet and dark through the mountains. The stars hanging low enough you feel like you could reach up and touch them. the trees closing in like old friends keeping watch. My granddaddy called it God's country, and I believed him. I'd drive it for hours just to clear my head, leave the noise of Asheville behind, roll the windows down, let the cold air bite my face and remind me I was still alive. But after that one night, 4 years ago this coming January, I don't take the Parkway after sunset anymore. Not if I can help it. Some things you see or feel change the way you look at a place forever. It was a Thursday, bitter cold, even for winter up high. I'd spent the day helping my cousin Ray fix the roof on his hunting cabin up near Craggy Gardens, the kind of cabin that's been in the family since before the Parkway was even paved. Hand-hewn logs, chinked with mud and moss, tin roof that sings when the rain comes. We'd been at it since dawn, tearing off rotten shingles, laying new ones, drinking thermos coffee gone cold hours earlier. By the time we called it quits, the sun was already dipping behind the ridges, painting everything blood orange and purple. Ray offered to let me stay the night. He had a cot by the wood stove, plenty of stew left, but I had work Friday morning down in town, pouring concrete for a new driveway. I told him I'd be fine, that I knew the road like the back of my hand. He looked at me funny, like he wanted to say something, but just nodded and handed me a leftover biscuit wrapped in foil. I pulled out around 8, headlights cutting sharp through the dusk. The temperature was dropping fast. Frost was already glittering on the guardrails. I had the heater cranked, radio tuned low to an old-time station playing fiddle tunes that scratched in and out with the elevation. The first hour was peaceful. Deer eyes flashing green at the roadside, the occasional owl sweeping across the beams. I ate Ray's biscuit while I drove, crumbs falling on my coat, thinking about nothing much except getting home to a hot shower and bed. It started in the curves. The Parkway doesn't give you many stretches, especially up high. It's all switchbacks and hairpins hugging the mountainside like it's scared to let go. I'd come out of a tight left turn, straighten for a breath, then dive into another right. That's when I noticed it first. A faint red glow in the rearview mirror, low to the ground, reflecting my own taillights back at me. At first I thought it was the guardrail catching the light, or maybe a reflective mile marker, but it wasn't quite right. Too soft, too diffuse, and it moved when the road moved. When I'd straighten out, it would vanish. When I'd lean into the next curve, there it was again, a little closer each time. I adjusted the mirror, thinking maybe it was just the angle. Told myself it was a trick of the light, fog starting to rise off the valleys and scatter in the red glow. But the more I watched, the more it bothered me. It wasn't a fixed reflection. It pulsed faintly, like something breathing. And it was low, barely above the asphalt, as if whatever was catching the light was crouched or crawling. I've seen bears on the Parkway before, big black shadows lumbering along the shoulder, eyes glowing in the headlights. I've seen coyotes, foxes, even a bobcat once. Animals move a certain way, hesitant, alert, ready to bolt. This didn't move like an animal. It moved smooth, deliberate, keeping perfect pace with my truck no matter how the road twisted. I sped up a little, pushing 50 on a stretch where 40 is plenty. The reflection kept up, neither gaining nor falling back. Then I slowed, dropping to 30, letting the engine idle down. The glow closed the gap, brightening in the mirror until I had to look away. My mouth went dry. I rolled the driver's window down an inch, cold air rushing in, carrying the smell of wet leaves and frozen dirt. I listened hard over the hum of the tires. No footfalls, no snapping twigs, no heavy animal breath. Just the wind whispering through the pines and hemlocks, too close on both sides, branches scraping the roof of the cab like fingernails. I told myself it was nothing. Probably a deer following the road, curious about the lights. They do that sometimes, trail cars for miles before peeling off into the woods. But deer don't move that smooth, don't stay that low, don't mirror every curve like they know what's coming. I kept driving, eyes flicking to the mirror more than the road, heart starting to thud slow and heavy. The fog thickened as I dropped into a hollow, swallowing the shoulders, making the trees loom like walls. The red reflection came and went with the bends, always there when the taillights swept across the inside of the curve, always gone when I straightened. By the time I reached the big overlook near Craven Gap, one of those wide gravel pools with a stone wall and a view all the way to Tennessee on clear days, I couldn't take it anymore.
My hands were sweating inside my gloves, and I felt watched in a way I never had before, not even hunting alone at dawn. I signaled out ahead, and though there wasn't another soul on the road, and eased onto the gravel, tires crunching loud in the stillness. I sat there a minute, engine idling, staring into the mirrors. Nothing. No red glow, no shape in the fog, just darkness pressing in from the tree line. I don't know what possessed me to get out. Stupidity, maybe, or that stubborn streak my mama always warned would get me in trouble. I needed to see, to prove to myself it was nothing. I grabbed the big mag light from under the seat, the heavy one with the knurled grip, and stepped out into the cold. The air hit me like a slap, thick with the smell of rot and leaf mold, the kind that rises when snowmelt soaks the forest floor. Gravel shifted under my boots as I walked to the back of the truck. Taillights painted everything red, throwing long shadows toward the trees. I clicked the flashlight on, beam cutting bright through the fog, sweeping slow across the tree line. Nothing. Just trunks and branches, rhododendron thickets black and tangled, frost glittering on fallen leaves, no eye shining back, no animal frozen in the light. I walked the shoulder a dozen yards back, beam playing low where the reflection had been. Bare dirt, frozen solid, no prints, not deer, not bear, not human. I even crouched, shining the light under my truck, half expecting to see something clinging there. Just mud and rust in the sway bar. But I felt it. Eyes on me, low to the ground, patient. The hair on my neck stood up and I straightened fast, sweeping the light in a wide arc. Still nothing. The fog moved slow, like it was breathing. Somewhere deeper in the woods an owl called, long and mournful, and something else answered. A sound I couldn't place, almost like a low whistle, but wetter. I backed toward the truck, not turning away from the trees, climbed in quick and locked the doors like that would help. I pulled out fast, gravel spraying, and got back on the parkway doing 60 before I even thought about it. The reflection didn't come back right away. For 10 minutes, maybe more, the mirror stayed dark, and I started to breathe again, telling myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that fatigue and cold and old ghost stories had gotten the better of me. But then, in a long, sweeping left turn, there it was, fainter now, but steady, riding the curve with me like it had never left. That's when the tapping started. Soft at first, almost like loose gravel hitting the undercarriage, but it was rhythmic, deliberate. Tap, 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 coming from underneath, toward the back, like fingers testing sheet metal, searching for a weak spot. I slowed a little, listening. The tapping slowed too, matching me. I sped up, and it quickened. Tap, 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 like impatience. My skin crawled. I reached down and killed the radio, needing silence to hear. The tapping continued, faint but clear, moving forward now, inch by inch, as if whatever was down there was feeling its way toward the cab. I didn't stop again. I couldn't. I drove the rest of the way with one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the flashlight like a club, eyes darting from road to mirrors to the floorboards. The tapping would pause when I checked the mirrors, start again when I looked away. Miles went by like that, past the Foggy Center, past the tunnels, down toward the lower elevations where the air warmed and the fog thinned. Every slowdown for a curve brought the tapping closer. Every burst of speed pushed it back, but never away. When I finally hit the lights of Asheville, the tapping stopped as sudden as it began. I pulled into the all-night Exxon on Tunnel Road, sat under the bright canopy with the engine running until the attendant came out and asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just tired, bought a coffee I didn't drink, and drove the last few miles home with every light in the house burning till morning. I didn't look under the truck until weeks later, when I took it to Tommy's garage for an oil change. Tommy's known me since we were kids, doesn't spook easy. He had it up on the lift, draining the pan when he went quiet. I was in the waiting room, but he called me back, voice strange. Pointed up at the underside, rear axle, frame rails, gas tank. Hand-shaped dents, he said. Not big, not deep, but clear as day. 5 fingers splayed, pressing inward like something had been holding on, testing the metal for give. Dozens of them, overlapping, some fresher than others. He asked if I'd been off-roading, hit something, maybe backed over a log. I told him no. He looked at me a long minute, then shrugged and said sometimes metal fatigues in weird ways from gold. I paid him and drove home slow, checking the mirrors more than the road. I've never gone back up to Ray's cabin at night. I sold the truck last year, told the buyer it ran fine, never mentioned the dents. But some nights when the wind comes down off the mountains and rattles the windows, I hear it. Soft, patient, underneath the floor of whatever I'm driving. Tap, 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 waiting for the next long curve in the dark.
I don't talk about that drive much anymore, partly because folks look at you sideways when you do, and partly because every time I try, the words stick in my throat like burrs caught on a wood coat after walking through the briars. It was late October, 5 years back now, 2019 if you're keeping count. The kind of night where the cold creeps in slow and deliberate, seeping through the cracks in your doors and windows before you even realize it's there. The leaves were mostly down by then, scattered across the roads like a warning, leaving the ridges looking bare and watchful, the way old men sit on porches staring at passers-by. I'd been up near Mount Mitchell visiting my sister Ellen. She lives in a little place just off the parkway, one of those old homesteads tucked into a cove where the sun don't hit till noon in winter and the shadows hang long even in summer. The house was built by our great-granddaddy, logs hewed by hand, chinked with clay that's cracked and been patched a dozen times since. Her husband Tom had passed the year before, taken quick by a heart attack while splitting wood out back, and she wasn't doing great, lonely in a way that eats at you from the inside, jumping at every creak of the floorboards, talking about hearing things outside the windows at night that she couldn't quite explain. I'd gone up to spend a couple days with her, like I did every few months since Tom was gone. Chopped a good pile of firewood from the deadfall behind her place, oak and hickory mostly, the kind that burns hot and long, stacked it neat under the lean-to so it's seasoned proper. Fixed the leak in her porch roof where the tin had rusted through, pounding in patches with roofing nails and sealant that smelled sharp in the cold air. We ate simple meals, pinto beans and cornbread one night, venison stew the next from a deer I'd gotten the season before. Mostly though, I was just there so she wasn't alone with her thoughts, sitting with her in the evenings while the wood stove popped and hissed, throwing sparks up the chimney like tiny stars escaping. We sat up late that last evening, longer than we should have, drinking coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe while the fire died down to embers. She told me stories I hadn't heard before, or maybe ones she'd hinted at but never laid out plain, about footsteps circling the house after dark, slow and measured, like someone pacing out the perimeter but never quite stepping into the light from the windows. About lights moving between the trees with no source, no flashlight beam, no car headlights, just pale glows that bobbed and weaved through the trunks like will-o'-the-wisps from the old tales. And about voices calling her name from the woods, soft at first and clearer, sounding almost like our daddy, gone 20 years now from the cancer that took him slow and painful. "Jessie," she said it would whisper, drawing out the syllables like he used to when calling us in from playing in the creek. I listened quiet, nodded along, told her it was probably coyotes yipping in the distance or wind funneling through the chimneys and hollows, making voices where there weren't none. But inside, I felt uneasy, a prickling at the back of my neck like when you're hunting and sense eyes on you before you see the deer. These mountains hold memories tight, layered deep in the soil and stone, and sometimes they give them back in ways that don't make a lick of sense to rational folks. When I finally headed to bed that night, the guest room under the eaves where the wind moaned something fierce, I lay awake longer than I cared to admit, listening to the house settle and wondering if I heard those footsteps too, faint on the frost-hard ground outside. When I left the next afternoon, later than I meant to, Ellen insisted on feeding me a big breakfast of eggs and sausage, then packing leftovers. It was already dipping toward dusk. The sky was bruising purple behind the peaks, heavy clouds rolling in from the west promising rain or maybe the first snow flurries up high. The air had that sharp bite that says winter's coming early, cutting through my flannel shirt even in the cab of the Jeep. My old Cherokee was loaded down, tools rattling in the back, a half-quart of that split oak Ellen insisted I take even though I had plenty at home, strapped under a tarp, and a paper bag of her molasses cookies on the passenger seat, the smell of ginger and cloves filling the air sweet and comforting. The heater worked just well enough to keep the chill off my bones, blowing lukewarm air that fogged the windows a bit till I wiped them clear. I had the radio tuned to the public station out of Asheville, some bluegrass program with banjo picking and high lonesome harmonies that fades in and out depending on which side of the ridge you're on. I was tired from the work and the late night talking, but not bad tired, the satisfying kind that makes the drive feel peaceful, like the mountains are rocking you home. The parkway was near empty that evening, just the occasional tourist in a rental car with out-of-state plates heading north, headlights flashing bright as they passed on the narrow road. I waved out of habit, the way folks do up here, even to strangers. A couple times I spotted deer at the roadside, eyes glowing green in my beams before they bounded off into the brush. The road wound familiar as an old song, curves I could take with my eyes half closed, overlooks where I'd stopped 100 times to stretch or just breathe in the view. But as the light failed, night fell quick, the way it does up high where there's no city glow to soften the edges. 1 minute there's a faint glow on the horizon, painting the clouds pink and gold. The next it's full dark, stars pricking through sharp and cold one by one.
Fog started gathering in the low spots, thin wisps at first drifting across the asphalt like ghosts, then thicker banks as I climbed toward the higher elevations near the viaduct. Around Black Mountain Gap, my phone buzzed once with a weak signal, then lost bars altogether. No surprise there. Whole stretches of the parkway are dead zones. I'd text Ellen when I dropped down toward Craggy or further south, let her know I was safe. The road twisted and turned tighter, asphalt slick with damp fallen leaves that skittered under the tires, guardrails glinting wet whenever my lights caught them. I kept it slow and steady, 35, maybe 40 on the rare straights, sipping cold coffee from the thermos she'd filled for me that morning, black and bitter the way I like it. The isolation settled in gradual, the way fog does. First you notice the quiet, then the weight of it. No other taillights ahead or behind for miles, just the hum of the engine and the occasional drip of condensation from the roof rack where ice was starting to form. I passed a few pull-offs, empty gravel lots with signs pointing to vistas that were swallowed in black now, and felt that old familiar peace of being alone in the hills. But there was something else too, a faint unease I chalked up to Ellen's story still rattling around in my head. The woods pressed close on both sides, dark walls of hemlock and oak, branches arching overhead in places like a tunnel. Every now and then a gust of wind would sigh through them, making the trees creak and whisper. That's when the radio changed, subtle at first, creeping up on me slow. The bluegrass was in the middle of a fast fiddle riff, something upbeat about rambling men in faraway homes, when it faded sudden, replaced by a low electronic hum, then dead silence. I frowned, reached over to twist the dial, scanned for the station again. Signals bounce funny off these peaks, but before my fingers touched the knob, a voice came on clear as if someone was sitting beside me. Male, middle-aged maybe, calm and official sounding, like the severe weather alerts you hear during hurricane seasons or ice storms. "This is an emergency broadcast for motorists on the Blue Ridge Parkway," it said, even and measured. "Dense fog is reported in multiple sections between mile markers 350 and 400. Drivers are advised to reduce speed, use low beams only, and maintain extra following distance. Wildlife activity is elevated. Multiple sightings of deer and black bear crossing the roadway have been reported. Proceed with extreme caution and be prepared for sudden stops." I left it on, figuring it was legitimate. The parkway does have its own emergency repeater system, tied into the ranger stations and weather service, and fog this thick could be dangerous. I eased off the gas a touch, dropping to 30, scanning the shoulders for eye shine. The voice continued, steady, almost soothing in its professionalism. "Visibility is severely limited south of mile marker 355. Designated pull-offs are available for resting or waiting out conditions. Stay alert for rock slides in curved sections and fallen branches on the roadway." Sounded standard enough. I'd heard similar warnings before, but then it shifted, just a hair. "Motorists operating a 1998 Jeep Cherokee, forest green exterior, North Carolina registration plate ending in 472, are advised to exercise extreme caution in the current conditions." My foot eased further off the accelerator without me thinking. The Jeep's in 98, bought it used 10 years ago and kept it running with spit and baling wire. Paint's faded to a deep forest green from the original Hunter. And the plate, yeah, it ends in 472, same as it has since I registered it. Could be coincidence. Lots of Cherokees on the road in these parts, lots of green ones. Maybe a ranger had spotted me earlier, run the plate for some reason, put out a specific alert. But my hands tightened on the wheel all the same, knuckles going pale in the dashboard glow. The voice continued seamless, listing seasonal road closures I'd already passed, reminding about seatbelt use and not stopping in the travel lanes, the usual script drilled into every broadcast. I told myself it was nothing out of the ordinary, just a detailed alert. Maybe they'd gotten a report of my vehicle weaving or something foolish. But the fog was thickening now, curling across the road in heavy banks like living smoke, reducing my world to the yellow cones of my headlights and the white lines snaking ahead. The isolation pressed in heavier, the woods darker, closer. A minute or two later, after a stretch of silence broken only by faint static, it spoke again, same voice, same unflappable tone. "Jesse Carver, traveling southbound near mile marker 679. Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Fog banks are moving in quickly from the west, with visibility dropping below 100 feet in places. It is strongly recommended that you locate a safe place to pull over and wait for improved conditions." My full name, clear as a church bell on Sunday morning, Jesse Carver, the name on my driver's license, the one only family and old friends from school use, not the shortened Jess most folks call me now. The coffee turned sour in my stomach, rising hot in my throat. No way that was coincidence. No ranger would address a broadcast by personal name unless it was life or death, and even then not like this. My heart started thudding heavy, a drum in my chest echoing in the quiet cab. I reached quick for the knob, twisted it hard to off. Silence rushed in, welcome at first, broken only by the rich hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional drip of meltwater from the roof where ice was starting to form. I checked the rear view, nothing but fog swallowing the road behind. Side mirrors the same. Ahead, just the twisting black ribbon and trees looming. I drove another mile, maybe two, gripping the wheel tight, trying to breathe steady through my nose. Told myself I'd misheard, that in static names can twist, sound like something personal when they're not. That I was tired from the days with Ellen, jumping from her tales of voices in the night, seeing meaning where there wasn't none. The road climbed a bit, fog thinning for a stretch, stars reappearing again, cold and distant. I cracked the window for air, letting the bite in to clear my head, but the unease lingered, a knot low in my gut. Then the radio clicked back on by itself. No hand near the dial, no jolt from a pothole, just the speakers crackling faint, then the voice returning smooth as before. "Jesse, you're approaching the Craggy Gardens picnic area and overlook. It's a good wide spot to rest with facilities and lighting. Visibility is down to 50 feet in the next valley. Help can reach you faster if you stop there." The overlook I knew well. Picnic tables under pavilions, trails leading to the ball where the rhododendrons bloom thick in summer. I'd stopped there dozens of times, but hearing it named, hearing my name again, sent ice down my spine. I smacked the power button hard with the heel of my hand, once, twice, off again. This time I yanked the volume knob clean out, the way my daddy showed me years ago when the radio in his old Ford acted up, sticking on stations. Plastic popped, knob came free in my fingers, but it stayed off. Good, finally. I rolled the window down to further, needing the rush of cold air, even if it carried the scent of pine and wet earth, and something metallic underneath, like old blood or rust. The overlook came up fast on the right, sign emerging from the mist, gravel crunching loud as the pull-off widened. Lighting poles stood dark, no power this late in the season, but I could make out the shapes of tables and the stone wall at the edge. I didn't slow, didn't even glance over long, just kept steady on the gas, curving past and back into the travel lane. The voice didn't return right away. Minutes ticked by, 5, 10 maybe, as the road dipped and rose, curving tight through cuts in the rocks where water dripped from overhangings, freezing in long icicles that caught my lights like teeth. Fog swirled differ again, forcing me to low beams, the world narrowing to a glowing tube ahead. I passed the short tunnel at Craggy Pinnacle, concrete walls close enough to touch, headlights reflecting weirdly off moisture, making fleeting shapes that looked almost human before dissolving. My eyes burned from staring fixed, but I didn't dare blink long or look away. The thermos sat forgotten, coffee gone cold and sloshing. Every sign I passed, the green mile markers, the brown recreation signs.
I've always felt at home on the Blue Ridge Parkway, even after dark. There's a peace to it most folks don't understand. The way the road ribbons quiet through the mountains, the trees closing in like they're keeping secrets, the stars so thick overhead you feel small in the best way. My people have lived in these hills for generations, back when the parkway was just a dream on paper, and I grew up driving it, hauling hay in summer, visiting kin scattered in the coves, hunting deer come fall. I know every curve from Cherokee to Afton, every overlook where you can pull off and breathe. But there's one night, 6 years ago this past November, that sits heavy on me whenever the fog rolls in thick or the wind moans through the pines. I don't speak of it often, because words make it feel closer somehow, but it's there all the same, waiting in the quiet moments. It was a Tuesday, cold even for late fall. I'd been down in Waynesville helping my uncle close up his cabin for the winter, one of those old chestnut log places built before the blight took the trees, set back on a dirt track off the parkway near Water Rock Knob. He's getting on in years, knees gone bad, and couldn't manage the heavy work alone. Boarding windows, draining pipes, stacking the last of the firewood under the eaves. We'd spent 2 days at it, working from dawn till the light failed, eating venison chili and cornbread at a plank table that's been in the family since the 1920s. He told stories like always, about hunting ginseng when it was still plentiful, about moonshine runs during Prohibition, about strange things seen on the ridges after dark that he laughed off but never quite explained. I listened, nodded, helped where I could. By the time I left, the sun was already low, painting the mountains gold and crimson, the air sharp enough to bite your lungs. I pulled out around 5, later than planned. Uncle pressed a jar of his blackberry jam on me and a paper sack of walnuts he'd gathered, made me promise to come back for Thanksgiving. The Jeep was loaded with tools in the back, a chainsaw I'd sharpened for him, the jam and nuts on the seat beside me. Heater worked decent. Radio pulled in the classic country station faint but clear enough. Hank Williams singing about lost highways, fitting somehow. Traffic was light, mostly locals heading home, a few tourists lingering for the leaf color. I took it easy, enjoying the drive, windows cracked to let in the smell of wood smoke drifting from hidden chimneys. Dusk came quick, the way it does in November. Sky went from orange to purple to black in what felt like minutes. The ridges turned into silhouettes against the last light. Fog started pooling in the valleys, thin at first, then thicker as I climbed higher. Around Balsam Gap, the other cars thinned out, one by one peeling off toward Silva or Maggie Valley, taillights disappearing into side roads. Soon it was just me, headlights cutting a tunnel through the dark, the occasional deer eyes flashing at the shoulder before they bolted. I didn't mind the solitude. It's when the mountains feel most like themselves. That's when I noticed the car behind me. It came into view on a straight stretch near Richland Balsam, the highest point on the whole parkway. Old sedan, dark color, maybe maroon or brown, hard to tell in the failing light. One headlight out, the other burning steady but dim. It settled in behind me at what folks call a respectful distance, not tailgating, not lagging. I glanced in the mirror a few times, figured it was someone local knowing the road same as me. No hurry to pass, no worry about being late. I kept my speed steady, 40 or so, and it matched perfect. Night fell full as I started the descent toward Cherokee.
Stars came out sharp, moon rising thin and silver over the peaks. Fog thickened again in the hollows, swirling across the asphalt like breath. The radio faded to static in spots, then caught again. George Jones now, voice lonesome and worn. Other cars had vanished entirely, no oncoming lights, no taillights ahead. Just the sedan behind, holding that same gap, maybe 200 yards. Its single headlight cast a lopsided beam, wobbling faint with the curves. I didn't think much of it at first. These roads empty out quick after dark this time of year. Tourists gone home, locals off the high ridges. But as miles rolled by, the consistency started to nag at me. Every curve I took, it followed smooth. Every time I eased off the gas to scan for deer, it eased too. Never closed the distance, never fell back. I tested it once on a rare straightaway near Soko Gap, waved my arm out the window, the universal signal to go ahead and pass. Plenty of room, clear sightline. Nothing. The sedan stayed put, headlights steady in the mirror. I slowed then, dropping to 30, then 25, almost crawling. Figured if they were timid or lost, they'd take the hint and go around. But it slowed too, matching me perfect, keeping that exact space between us. No flash of brights, no horn, no attempt to overtake. Just there, patient. My skin started to prickle, the kind of feeling you get when you're hunting and realize something's watching you back. Hours began to stretch strange. I'd glance at the clock, 7:30, 8, 8:45, and it felt longer, like time was thickening with the fog. The sedan never wavered. I sped up to 50 on a downhill, and it kept pace without effort. Slowed again for a tight hairpin, and it mirrored me. No other vehicles anywhere, not even a ranger truck. The woods pressed close, dark and silent except for wind high in the branches. Every overlook I passed was empty, gravel lots black and still. Around 9, maybe later, I couldn't stand it anymore. Needed to see, to know. There's a big overlook near Cowie Mountain, wide pull-off with a stone wall and a view clear to South Carolina on good days. I signaled early, eased onto the gravel slow, tires crunching loud in the quiet, pulled all the way to the far end facing the valley, and waited, engine idling, heater blowing warm. The sedan slowed too, stopped dead in the travel lane behind me, maybe 50 yards back, single headlight staring like a cyclops eye. No blinker, no movement to pull in beside or pass, just stopped, engine running. I could hear the faint rumble carried on the cold air. I sat there, heart starting to thud heavier, watching the mirror. Minute passed, 2, 5, nothing. No door open, no silhouette shifted behind the wheel. The headlight didn't waver, didn't blink. Fog drifted between us slow, but the beam cut through steady. I waited longer than I should have, half expecting something, anything to happen. A wave, a flash of light, someone stepping out to ask directions. But it just sat, patient, watching. The night pressed in, absolute quiet except my engine and theirs, faint and distant. Finally, the weight of it got too much. I eased back onto the parkway, checking mirrors careful. The sedan didn't move at first, stayed put as I accelerated away, headlight shrinking in the glass. Relief watched over me, cold and sudden. Whatever it was, shy driver, mechanical trouble, someone lost, they'd stayed behind. I drove steady, not too fast, letting the distance grow. 10 minutes passed, 15, no sign in the mirrors, just empty road and fog and stars. Then, on a long sweeping curve near the Thomas Divide, it was there again. Same distance, same broken headlight, like it never stopped, never waited, just reappeared smooth as breath. My stomach dropped. I checked the odometer, 10 miles, exactly since the overlook. No way it could have caught up without me seeing, not without passing at speed. But there it was, holding perfect, patient as before. I didn't look back much after that. Kept my eyes front, hands tight on the wheel, foot steady on the gas. The sedan followed the whole way down past the Okanagan Visitor Center, past the fields opening up as elevation fell, into the lights of Cherokee where the parkway ends. Only then, under street lamps and neon from the gas stations did it vanish. One moment in the mirror, next gone. No turn signal, no side road taken that I saw, just not there. I drove the last stretch home to Bryson City on autopilot, windows up, radio off, pulled into my driveway well past midnight, sat in the Jeep a long minute listening to the engine tick cool. House was dark, quiet, wife and kids long asleep. I grabbed the jam and walnuts, locked up careful, went inside without turning on many lights. It wasn't until morning I saw the mud, dried thick on the rear bumper, streaks and smears like someone had wiped dirty hands across it, and in the center, clear as day in the gray light, fingerprints. 5 distinct prints, splayed wide, pressed deep into the caked clay. Human, too big for a child, too deliberate for accident, like someone had grabbed hold while I drove, or stood close while I waited at that overlook, reaching out but not quite touching metal. I hosed it off quick before the kids saw, told myself it was from parking on the dirt track at Uncle's, maybe brush against a bank somewhere, but I knew better. The mud was wrong color, redder like the clay higher up near Cowie, not the dark loam around Waynesville, and those prints, they faced forward like whatever made them had been holding on, facing the same direction I was. I haven't driven the parkway alone at night since. Daytime's fine, families in minivans, cyclists, rangers waving hello, but after dusk I take the interstate or the back roads through the valleys, longer but lit. Uncle passed 2 years ago, cabin sold to some folks from Florida who'll never stow it is. I still have that jar of blackberry jam in the pantry unopened. Sometimes I take it out, look at the scrawled label in his shaky hand and wonder, because some nights when the fog sits heavy and the wind comes down off the mountains just right, I hear it, an engine idling faint outside, older model, 1 cylinder missing maybe, patient, waiting for me to pull out alone again, and I check the mirrors more than I should, even park safe in my driveway, just in case that single headlight appears, holding distance, refusing to pass. I lock the doors tight now, always, but sometimes in the quiet before sleep I wonder what would have happened if I'd waited longer at that overlook, if I'd stepped out, walked back through the fog to see who or what was behind that wheel. I don't think I want the answer, but part of me knows it's still out there, driving slow, looking for the next set of taillights to follow home.
I've lived in these mountains all my life, born and raised in a little holler outside Banner Elk, where the creek runs cold year-round and the ridges crowd close enough to make you feel watched even on bright days. The Blue Ridge Parkway's been part of my blood since I was old enough to ride in the passenger seat of my daddy's old Chevy, him pointing out overlooks and telling stories about the Cherokee who walked these trails long before the road was paved, or about settlers who vanished into the laurel thickets, never to be seen again. Folks up here grow up knowing the land has its moods, days when the air feels heavy with something unspoken, nights when the quiet gets too deep and you start hearing things that aren't there. I've always respected that. But there's one night, 7 years ago come January 2018, that I still can't shake. It sits in me quiet most days, but when the weather turns damp and cold, or when I catch the smell of wet leaves and pine, it rises up slow and heavy, like a memory that won't stay buried. I'd been up near Linville visiting my cousin Clara. She lives in one of those old family cabins off the parkway, the kind with hand-split shingles and a stone chimney that leans just a little from 100 years of wind and frost. The place has been in the family since before the parkway was even a plan, built by our great-granddaddy who cleared the land with a mule and a crosscut saw. Clara's husband Ray had passed sudden the winter before, found him out back by the woodpile. Heart gave out while he was swinging the maul still in his hand when she found him. She'd been struggling since. Not just the grief, though that was heavy enough, but the loneliness of being up there alone with the quiet pressing in. She'd started noticing things. Lights moving slow between the trees with no road behind them. Footsteps on the gravel drive that stopped whenever she looked out the window. A feeling like someone was standing just beyond the porch light, watching. I'd gone to spend a few days, help her winterize the place, clean the gutters where ice had cracked the tin, stack the last of the firewood under the shed, patch the screen porch where squirrels had chewed through the wire. We worked from dawn till the light failed, eating venison chili and cornbread at the same plank table that's been there since the 1920s, talking about nothing and everything. We talked late into the evenings by the wood stove, her telling me about the sounds at night, branches scraping the tin roof that weren't branches, footsteps circling the house slow and measured, the way a hunter walks when he's tracking. She said sometimes she heard a low whistle, almost like a person calling soft through the trees, but when she opened a door, nothing but cold air rushed in. I told her it was probably coyotes or wind funneling through the hollows, but she'd just shake her head slow, eyes distant, like she knew better but didn't want to say it plain. "It's the land, Wade," she said once, voice low. "Sometimes it remembers things. Sometimes it wants company." I nodded, didn't argue. These hills have a way of making you believe things you'd laugh off down in town. I left later than I should have, around 6 that evening, after a big supper of chicken and dumplings she insisted on cooking. Sky was already going dark, clouds low and heavy with the promise of rain or maybe snow higher up. She hugged me long on the porch, made me take a thermos of coffee and a Tupperware of leftovers, told me to text when I got home to my place down near Blowing Rock. I promised I would, though I knew service drops out for miles on the stretch I'd be driving. The truck, an old Dodge Dakota I'd had since high school, was running fine, heater blowing warm, radio pulling in the gospel station faint but steady. I pulled onto the parkway southbound just as the first stars pricked through, the road empty except for a couple northbound cars without estate plates, folks heading back after seeing the falls or the ski slopes. Night comes quick in January. One minute there's a gray glow on the ridges, the next it's full dark, the trees black walls on both sides. Temperature dropped fast. Frost started feathering the edges of the windshield where the defroster couldn't quite reach. I kept it slow, 35, 40 on the straights, sipping Clara's coffee, black and strong the way she makes it. The road wound familiar, curves I could take without thinking, guardrails flashing by whenever my lights caught them. Fog started gathering in the low spots, thin wisps at first drifting across the asphalt like smoke from hidden campfires. Nothing unusual. Fog's as common up here as rain in spring. I figured it would burn off or settle lower as I climbed. It thickened gradual as I headed toward Grandfather Mountain. Not sudden, but steady, the kind that creeps in from the valleys and settles heavy. My headlights cut shorter beams, yellow cones swallowed quick. I eased off to 30, then 25, scanning the shoulders for deer. The fog kept pace, pressing closer to the pavement, curling around the truck like it was feeling its way. I turned the high beams on for a stretch, but they just bounced back worse, scattering light in every direction, so I switched to low and kept steady. The radio faded to static, then silence. I left it off, preferring the hum of tires and the occasional creak of the truck body as it took the curves.
That's when it started feeling wrong. I slowed to 20 on a tight series of switchbacks, fog thick enough now to hide the tree line. The mist seemed to thicken with me, closing in until I could barely see the white line on the right. Visibility down to 30 feet, maybe less. I creeped along, heart starting to thud a little heavier, telling myself it was just weather, that these mountains brew fog like nowhere else. But then, on a rare straight bit, I sped up, pushed it to 35, 40, wanting to get through the worst of it and drop down to where the air might clear. And the fog thinned. Not all at once, but enough. The beams cut farther, the road opening up ahead, mist retreating to the shoulders like it was giving me room to breathe. I frowned, eased off the gas again, curious. Dropped back to 25. The fog surged forward immediate, wrapping the truck tight, swallowing the headlights till I could see nothing but swirling gray. My stomach knotted. I sped up once more, 45 this time, and it receded again, thinning just enough to keep me moving safe, but not full clear, never enough to relax. Like it was deciding my speed, pacing me deliberate. I told myself it was coincidence. Wind shifting, elevation changing, cold air pooling different in the curves. But the more I tested it, the clearer it got. Slow down, and the fog pressed in thick, forcing me near to a stop. Speed up, and it pulled back, allowing just enough visibility to go faster, but never enough to feel safe. It felt intentional, like something alive out there in the mist, guiding me, controlling how quick I could run. My hands sweated inside gloves, breath shallow. I thought of Clara's stories, about the mist that sometimes rose up and took folks, leading them off the road or into the woods, never to find their way back. Old tales, the kind grandparents told to keep kids from wandering. But out here alone, they felt real, too real. The road kept winding, higher and colder. No other cars now, hadn't seen taillights or headlights for half an hour at least. The fog played its game steady. I'd push 50 on a downhill, and it would thin to 100 feet ahead. Ease to 30 for a curve, and it closed like a fist. Every overlook I passed was swallowed, signs emerging sudden from the mist like warnings. I thought about pulling over, waiting it out, but something stopped me. The idea of sitting still in that fog, engine off, felt worse than moving. Like stopping would be giving in to whatever was out there. I don't know how long it went on, 40 minutes, an hour, time stretching strange in the gray. My coffee had gone hold in the thermos. Every now and then a gust of wind would sigh through the trees, carrying the scent of wet bark and earth, and I'd swear I heard something else, a low murmur, almost voices, too faint to make out words. I told myself it was imagination, the heater fan, anything but what it sounded like. Finally, I couldn't take the pacing anymore. I braked hard at the next wide spot, a scenic pull-off I knew well, gravel lot with a view of the Linville Gorge when it's clear. Came to a full stop, truck idling, lights cutting into nothing but wall of mist. I waited, heart pounding loud in the quiet, listening for anything that might explain it. The fog surged. It rolled forward fast, wrapping the truck complete, thicker than before. Headlights dimmed to useless glow, swallowed whole. Sound muffled sudden, the engine hum dulled, wind gone silent. I couldn't see past the hood, couldn't hear anything but my own breathing, shallow and quick. Then the footsteps started. Slow, careful, circling, gravel shifting faint under weight, right side first, then back, then left. Not hurried, not running, measured steps, like someone pacing out the perimeter of the truck, feeling their way in the blind. Close enough I should have seen a shape, but the fog hid everything. I locked the doors quick, though it felt foolish. Leaned forward, straining to see through the windshield. Nothing but gray. The steps kept going, round and round. Never faster, never stopping. Close enough I should have heard breath, but there was only silence and the crunch of boots on frozen gravel. I hit the horn once, sharp blast cutting the quiet. The steps paused, then continued, slower now, deliberate, as if acknowledging me but not deterred. My skin crawled cold. I thought of feral people, stories you hear about folks living wild in the national forests, descendants of runaways or hermits gone strange over generations, watching the roads from the laurels. Or worse, something older, tied to the land before the parkway cut through, something that remembered the old trails and didn't like cars cutting across them. The steps circled closer, gravel crunching softer but nearer. I could almost feel the weight of eyes on the truck, low and patient. I couldn't wait anymore. Threw it in drive, floored it blind. Tires spun gravel, then caught, truck lurching forward into the wall of mist. For
For a heartbeat, everything was gray, suffocating. Then I broke through, like bursting out of water. Fog parted sudden and complete, road clear ahead under stars and moonlight, mist retreating fast behind me like a tide pulling back. I didn't slow for miles, kept it at 60, 70 on straights I usually take careful, hands shaking on the wheel. When I finally risked a look in the rear view, the fog stood still back there, a solid wall across the parkway, unnaturally straight, towering up into the trees. Not drifting, not following, just waiting, watching me go. I drove the rest of the way home with windows up, heater cranked, not stop until I pulled into my driveway well past midnight. Sat there long after killing the engine, watching the mirrors for any sign of mist creeping from the ridges. Nothing. Clear night, stars sharp, ordinary. I went inside, locked the doors, didn't...
I don't tell this story often, not because folks wouldn't believe it. They hear stranger things up here in the mountains, but because saying it out loud makes me feel like I'm calling her back somehow. Like speaking her name might stir whatever's left of her out there on the parkway. It happened 8 years ago this coming February, on a night so cold the air hurt to breathe deep, and the stars looked close enough to burn your eyes if you stared too long. I'd been up near Doughton Park visiting my Aunt Ruth in her cabin, one of those old places built from chestnut logs before the blight took 'em all, set back on a high ridge where the wind howls straight down off the mountains like it's got somewhere important to be and no patience for anything in its way. Ruth was getting on in years then, living alone since Uncle Calvin passed from the lung cancer that ate him slow over 3 seasons, and I'd gone to check on her like I did every few months, split a good pile of firewood from the deadfall behind her place, fixed the flue in her chimney that had started smoking back into the room instead of up the stack, patched the roof where ice dams had lifted a few shingles. We spent 3 quiet days together, working side by side from dawn till the light failed, eating simple meals of ham and beans, cornbread still warm from the oven, strong coffee that could float a nail. In the evenings, we sat by the wood stove, the fire popping and hissing as it burned down to coals, throwing orange light across the worn pine floors and the quilt-covered couch that had belonged to my grandparents. Ruth talked some about the old days, when the parkway was new and shiny, a wonder that brought flatlanders up to gawk at the views, when folks still walked the ridges to visit kin or trade at little stores that aren't there anymore. She talked about Calvin, too, voice soft, remembering how he'd court her on summer evenings, driving her up the unfinished road in his daddy's Ford. But she talked more than usual about quieter things, about hearing soft knocks on the door late at night when no one was there, about a woman's voice calling faint from the trees like she was lost and looking for the way home. "It ain't scary, Tommy," she said once, staring into the flames. "Just sad, like someone's still trying to get where they were going." I told her it was the wind playing tricks, or maybe owls calling down the hollow, but she just looked at me with those pale blue eyes that had seen 90 winters and said, "Some things don't rest easy, child. This land remembers everybody who ever walked it, and sometimes it gives them back for a minute." I left later than I meant to, around 7 that evening, after she fed me a big supper and wrapped leftovers careful in foil. Sky was clear, but already full dark, moon not risen yet, temperature dropping fast enough I could feel it through my coat while I loaded tools into the bed of my Ford. She stood on the porch in her old wool coat and scarf, watching me tie down the tarp, pressing a paper sack of her molasses cookies on me and a thermos of fresh coffee, making me promise to call when I got home to my place down near Sparta. I told her I would, hugged her careful. She was frail by then, bones like a bird's, though I knew cell service was spotty at best on the parkway this far north, whole stretches where the signal just dies between the ridges. The truck started rough in the cold, battery turning slow, but caught on the 3rd try, heater blowing lukewarm air that smelled faintly of pine from the little tree air freshener hanging on the mirror. I pulled out slow, gravel crunching loud under the tires, waving one last time as her porch light shrank behind me in the rear view, a single yellow glow against the black wall of trees. The parkway was empty that night, the way it gets in deep winter. No tourists this time of year, no leaf peepers or hikers, just locals all hunkered down against the cold. I took it southbound, keeping steady at 45 where the road allowed, radio tuned low to the AM station out of Galax playing old gospel hymns that scratched in and out with the elevation changes. Fog wasn't bad at first, just thin patches drifting through the hollows like smoke from chimneys you couldn't see. But the cold was bitter, 20 below with the wind chill, the kind that freezes your breath on the inside of the window if you crack it even a hair.
I sipped Ruth's coffee, black and strong the way she always made it, thinking about nothing much except getting home to my own wood stove and bed, maybe reading a little before sleep. The road wound familiar as breathing. Curves I'd taken since I was 16. Overlooks I knew by heart. Guardrails flashing silver whenever my headlights caught them. I'd been driving maybe an hour, somewhere past mile marker 230, climbing a long grade where the spruce grow thick and dark, when I saw her. The pull-off came up sudden on the right, one of those small gravel lots the Park Service put in decades ago, wooden sign half rotted and leaning, pointing to a trail that hadn't been maintained in years, weeds and briars choking what was left of the path. My headlights swept across it as I crested the rise, and there she was, standing just off the pavement at the edge of the gravel, waving one arm slow and deliberate, like she'd been waiting a long time and wasn't in any hurry. Middle-aged woman, I figured at first glance, bundled heavy in a dark wool coat that looked too thin for this weather, scarf wrapped tight around her head and neck, hands in thick gloves. She didn't jump out into the road or flag frantic like some folks do, just stood there calm, arm raised steady, face turned toward the oncoming lights like she knew someone would come eventually. I hesitated longer than I cared to admit. You hear stories up here about folks preying on good Samaritans, robbing them blind or worse, especially on lonely stretches after dark, and being alone on the parkway at night makes you cautious, makes you weigh every choice twice. But she was a woman, older, looked cold and tired more than threatening, shoulders slumped like she'd been walking a while. Mountain manners won out in the end, the way they usually do. I slowed gradual, signaled out of habit even though no one was behind me for miles, and eased onto the gravel, stopping 20 feet away with the engine running and high beams dimmed to low so I wouldn't blind her. She walked toward the driver's side slow, boots crunching on the frozen gravel, breath pluming white and thick in the headlights, hanging in the air longer than it should have in that cold. I rolled the window down just an inch, enough to talk but not enough for a hand to reach in if things went wrong. Cold rushed immediate, sharp as knives on my face. "You all right, ma'am?" I called, voice louder than I meant in the quiet. "Need help? It's awful cold to be out here." She stopped a few feet from the door, close enough now I could see her clear, pale as paper, thin cheeks, eyes dark and sunken like she hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. Lines around her mouth spoke of worry more than age. "Yes, thank you," she said, voice soft but clear, carrying easy over the wind and the low idle of the engine. "I'm trying to find the campground, the one down off the trail here, Raven's Hollow, I believe it's called. My car broke down a ways back up the road, and I've been walking quite a while trying to find it." I frowned deep. Raven's Hollow? I knew the name like I knew my own. Old campground used to be popular back in the 60s and 70s. Tent sites scattered along a creek, little ranger station with a wood stove, outhouses that smelled of lime in summer. Families came from all over to pitch tents there. But it closed permanent in the early 80s after heavy floods washed out the access road twice in one season, and the Park Service decided it wasn't worth rebuilding. Been posted closed ever since. Trails overgrown with rhododendron and blackberry briars. Signs taken down mostly. The sites themselves swallowed by the forest. Nobody had camped there legally in 40 years. "It's closed, ma'am," I said careful, trying to keep my voice kind. "Hasn't been open since the 80s. Floods took out the road and they never fixed it. Nothing left down there now but ruins and overgrowth." She tilted her head slow, confused, scarf slipping a little to show gray hair pinned neat in a style I hadn't seen much since old photographs. "Closed?" she repeated, like the word didn't make sense. "But we were just there last summer. My husband Harold and the boys, Tommy and Jack, we always stay at Site 12, right by the creek where the water sings all night. The boys love fishing for brook trout there in the mornings." Last summer. The words landed wrong, heavy. I leaned closer to the gap in the window, trying to see her better in the dashboard glow and headlights. Her coat looked old-fashioned somehow, cut longer than modern ones, big dark buttons, collar high and stiff, gloves thick knit, the kind my grandmother used to make. "Ma'am," I said slow, "what year do you think it is?" She blinked once, frowned deeper, lines creasing her forehead, a long pause, like she was thinking hard. "1976, of course," she said finally, voice softer now. "July. Wasn't it warm when you came up the mountain?" The dogwoods were still blooming down low. My blood went cold, colder than the air rushing through that inch of open window. 1976. 41 years gone, more now. I stared at her, mouth dry, heart starting to thud heavy against my ribs. "No, ma'am," I said, words sticking. "It's 2017, February. Been a hard winter." Her face changed then, not scared, not angry, just fell, slow and complete, like something inside her broke quiet and final. Eyes widened, lips parted on a breath that plumed white and hung too long. She took one step back, then another, boots scrap and gravel faint. My headlights shone full on her now, and that's when I saw it clear. Edges of her coat, faint but unmistakable, the light passing through like thin fabric caught in a breeze, or smoke curling slow. Not solid all the way through, glowing soft around the outline, like frost catching the beams wrong, or like she was made of the cold itself.
I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes with a gloved hand, thinking fatigue or the coffee or Ruth's stories had finally gotten to me. When I looked again, the pull-off was empty. No woman, no footprints in the frozen gravel, just the wind moaning low through the bare branches of oaks and the spruce, my truck idling alone under the stars. I sat there longer than I should have, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, heart hammering loud in the quiet cab, staring at the spot where she'd stood. Told myself I'd imagined it, that loneliness and the cold and Ruth's stories had planted something in my head, that it was just a lost hiker playing some cruel prank or my eyes playing tricks in the dark. But the air in the cab felt heavier, colder, like something had come in through that inch of open window and lingered. The thermos of coffee had gone icy on the seat beside me, faster than it should have in that cold. And when I finally put it in gear and eased back onto the parkway, I kept checking the mirrors, half expecting to see her walking behind, or standing at the edge again, patient. I drove the rest of the way home fast as I dared on potentially icy roads, windows rolled tight, radio off, heat cranked high, though it didn't seem to reach me anymore. Didn't stop again till I was off the parkway entirely, down in Sparta where there's street lights and houses close enough to see porch glows. Pulled into my drive near midnight, sat with the engine running till the porch light timer kicked on and the dog started barking inside, familiar and safe. Went in, locked the doors firm, built up the fire in my own stove, though the house wasn't that cold. It wasn't until a week later, when the memory wouldn't leave me alone, kept waking me at night with the image of her face falling when I said the year, that I looked it up, drove to the library in Boone, asked the librarian quiet for help with the old newspaper archives on microfilm, found the article buried in the July 28, 1976 edition of the Watauga Democrat, front page below the fold. Local woman named Evelyn Morrow, 47, reported missing after her car broke down on the Blue Ridge Parkway near Downton Park during a sudden heavy fog. Husband and 2 young sons, Tommy and Jack, were waiting at Ravens Hollow campground for her to join them after visiting family in Meadows of Dan. Car found 2 miles north of the pull-off, hood up, battery dead, no note. Search parties combed the area for days. Body discovered 3 days later.
I've always felt safe on the Blue Ridge Parkway at night, or at least I used to. There's a rhythm to it that settles into your bones after a while. The way the road curls gentle through the dark, the trees standing close like they're listening to every turn of your tires. The quiet so deep you can hear your own thoughts clear for once. No radio needed. My family's been in these mountains since before the parkway was even dreamed up, back when the trails were narrow footpaths worn by Cherokee hunters or wagon tracks rutted deep by settlers hauling goods over the ridges. I grew up driving it every which way, running errands to town for my mama, visiting kin scattered in hidden coves where the mail only came twice a week, hauling firewood in fall or Christmas trees come December. I know every mile from Cherokee clear up to Cumberland Knob, every place where the fog likes to pool thick in the hollows, every curve where the deer cross at dusk like clockwork. But there's one night, 9 years ago this past March, that changed how the dark feels to me forever. I don't talk about it much. Folks already think mountain people are half superstitious anyway, carrying on about haints and signs. But it's there, quiet most days, waiting for a windy night or a long drive alone to bring it back sharp as those scratches still faint on my truck door. I've been up near Little Switzerland helping my brother Dale fix up his cabin. It's one of those old homesteads tucked off the parkway on a dirt track that turns to mud when it rains, hand-hewn logs darkened with creosote and age, tin roof that sings something fierce when the rain comes hard or the wind rattles the ridges. Dale had bought it cheap a couple years before from an estate sale after the previous owner, an old recluse named Harlan Tate, passed alone in his sleep by the stove. The place needed work bad. Roof patched in half-dozen spots with mismatched tin, chimney repointed where mortar had crumbled, windows resealed against the drafts that howl down off the Black Mountains like they're trying to get inside. We'd spend 4 full days at it, working from sun up till we couldn't see our hands anymore, eating deer steaks Dale grilled over hickory coals and potatoes baked in the ashes, drinking coffee strong enough to strip paint off a barn. Dale's quieter than me, always has been, takes after our daddy that way, but we talked plenty while we worked. About family back home, about the price of lumber these days, about the strange things you hear up high sometimes when the wind dies down. He told me a few stories about the cabin he hadn't mentioned when he bought it, how Harlan had gigged there alone 40 years, rarely coming to town, trapping and gardening mostly, how folks said he'd gone a little odd toward the end, talking to himself out on the porch at night, or yelling at something in the trees that no one else could see. Dale laughed it off mostly, said it was just old man loneliness, but I caught him checking the locks more than once before we turned in, and he kept the rifle loaded by the door even though bear season was over. One night by the stove, after a long day shingling the backside of the roof, he mentioned hearing scratches sometimes, soft like claws on wood, coming from the outside walls after dark.
Probably coons, he said quick, poking the fire, or squirrels in the eaves. But his eyes didn't match his words, and I didn't push it. I left on a Saturday evening, later than planned. Dale had insisted on a big breakfast, eggs scrambled with deer sausage, biscuits fresh from the oven with sawmill gravy thick enough to stand a spoon in, and then we'd spent the afternoon splitting the last of the locust he'd dropped the week before, wood so hard it rang like iron under the maul. By the time I loaded my tools and the chainsaw into the bed of my old Chevy Silverado, tying everything down careful under the tarp, the sun was already low behind the peaks, painting the sky blood orange and purple. Dale walked me out to the truck, handed me a sack of his smoked sausage links and a jar of his wife's chow chow she'd sent up, made me promise to text when I got home to my place down near Marion. I told him I would, hugged him quick, the way men do up here, more backslap than embrace, though I knew the signal would drop dead soon as I hit the main road. The truck started easy despite the chill coming on, battery strong, heater blowing warm air that smelled of sawdust and coffee. I pulled out slow, gravel crunching loud under the tires, waving one last time as his figure shrank in the mirror, the cabin's single light glowing yellow behind him, against the black wall of trees closing in. The parkway was near empty that evening, just a few cars heading north with out-of-state plates, taillights disappearing quick around the tight curves. I took it southbound, settling into the familiar rhythm of the drive, windows cracked a couple inches for fresh air, even though the temperature was dropping fast with the sundawn. Fog started gathering in the low spots as full dark fell, thin whispers at first drifting across the asphalt like smoke from hidden chimneys, then thicker banks curling up from the valleys. I kept it steady, 40 on the rare straights, slower in the hairpins, sipping coffee from the thermos Dale's wife had filled that morning, black and bitter the way I like it. The radio caught the bluegrass station out of Spruce Pine, faint but steady, a fast banjo tune filling the cab with picking that echoed off the ridges. I'd been driving maybe 40 minutes, coming out of a long sweeping curve near the Museum of North Carolina Minerals, where the viaduct carries you high over the gorge, when I heard the first scratch. It was soft but unmistakable, metal on metal, slow and deliberate, like a key dragging lazy along the paint or a nail testing for weakness. Coming from the passenger side, low on the door panel, near the bottom edge. I glanced over quick, saw nothing but darkness pressing against the window, and the faint red glow of dashboard lights reflecting back. Checked the side mirror, empty road behind me, fog swirling in the taillights but no branches close enough to reach, no guardrail scraping. The trees were set back a good 10 feet on that side, rhododendron that's black and still. I figured it was a stray twig caught in the wind or maybe a rock kicked up from my own tire, though the sound was too even, too drawn out for that. I rolled the passenger window up tight with a switch, turned the radio louder to cover it, a lonesome pill tune now about rambling men and faraway homes, and kept driving. Told myself it was nothing, just the truck settling or ice forming on the running board. But a minute later, coming into another curve, he came again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Longer this time, 3 distinct lines tracked slope, keeping pace with the truck speed. Not frantic, not random, measured like someone walking alongside, reaching out to feel the metal, testing and deliberate. My skin prickled cold despite the heater pulling hot. I slowed a touch, dropping to 35, listening hard over the engine and tires. The scratching slowed too, matching me perfect. Pauses longer between drags. Sped up a little, 45 on a downhill straight, and it quickened, steady bit him again, never missing a beat. I checked mirrors over and over, rear view clear, side mirror empty, no headlights behind, no shape running in the dark beside me, just fog and trees and the endless black ribbon of road. I told myself it was branches, had to be, overhanging limbs in the curve, scraping when the passenger side swung close, but I knew the road, knew there weren't low branches on that stretch, not this time of year with leaves down and nothing to catch the wind. The scratching continued on and off for miles, stopping on open straights where the shoulder widened, starting again when the road bend left and the passenger side swung toward the tree line, each time softer than a branch should be, more patient, more intentional. By the time I passed the Linville Falls overlook, gravel lot empty and dyed, sign barely visible in the mist, it was constant. Scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause, like fingernails long and hard, dragging slow along the door from back to front, or claws. I checked the passenger window, glass clean, no marks inside. Cracked my own window an inch, needing to hear outside, confirm it was external. Wind rushed in cold and sharp, carrying the smell of pine sap and wet earth, but no other sound, no footsteps running alongside, no heavy breathing, no branches snapping, just the scratching, clear and close, as if it was inside the cab with me, though I knew it wasn't. My hands tightened on the wheel, sweat beading despite the chill seeping through the crack. I thought of the stories Dale had mentioned, Harlan yelling at something in the trees, scratches on the cabin walls he'd patched over with new siding but never explained. Thought of older tales too, the kind our granddaddy told about things that follow travelers on lonely roads, keeping pace in the dark, marking what they want. Feral people, some said, folks who had gone into the woods generations ago and never came out human again, watching from the laurels, waiting for a chance, or echoes of something older tied to the land before the white man cut the road through. I pulled over once, couldn't help it, at a wide overlook near Chesto View, one I knew well, with a short trail to a rock outcrop and a view down into the gorge when it's clear. Eased to a slow stop on the gravel, engine idling no, headlights cutting into thick fog that swallowed everything past 20 feet. The scratching stopped immediate, sudden as flipping a switch. Silence rushed in, heavy and complete. I waited, heart thudding loud in my ears, watching the mirrors and windows. Minute passed, 2, 3, nothing moved outside, no shape in the mist, no shadow pressing against the glass. I killed the headlights, sigh and dashboard glow a moment, listening harder.
wind sighed high in the pines, an owl called distant down the slope. Nothing else, no gravel shifting under feet, no breath fogging the windows. I sat longer than I should have, maybe 10 minutes, telling myself it was over. That stopped, broke whatever it was. Finally put it in gear, eased back onto the parkway, slow, accelerating gradual. The scratching resumed before I hit 30, soft at first, tentative, then steady again, keeping perfect pace like it never left, like whatever made it had been waiting patient for me to move once more. The rest of the drive blurred, strange and long, miles stretched endless, time thick as the fog. I pushed the speed harder, 50, 60 on downhill straights I usually take careful, trying to outrun it, leave it behind in the curves, but the scratching kept up, neither faster nor slower, just there, relentless. Slowed for tight hairpins and it eased too, pauses longer, like it was adjusting stride. I didn't stop again, couldn't bear the thought of sitting still with it right outside the passenger door, inches away, waiting for silence to try something else. The fog thickened and thinned with elevation, but the sound stayed constant. I thought about pulling my pistol from the glove box, kept it there for sakes or broken down trouble, but what would I shoot at? Nothing to see, just the dark and the marks I couldn't yet prove were real. The radio played on, songs I knew by heart but didn't hear, voice after voice singing about loss and going home. The scratching faded gradual only when I dropped low enough for streetlights to appear ahead, near Gilberly Gap where the parkway ends and civilization creeps back. Pulled off onto 226, drove the last miles home with windows sealed tight, heat cranked high, though sweat cold on my back, radio loud though I wasn't listening to a note. Sat home past 11, later than I told my wife, parked close to the house on the driver's side like always, porch light flooding the cab, sat in the truck a long minute after killing the engine, listening hard, nothing but crickets starting early in the mild lowlands and the tick-tick-tick of meal cooling. Went inside quiet, checked every door and window twice, didn't sleep much that night or the next. Next morning, sunlight slanting cold across the frost on the yard. I walked around the truck slow, coffee in hand, dreading my side. The driver's side was clean, road dust and a little mud from Dale's track, nothing more. Hooded and then normal, but the passenger door told the story I'd known deep down was coming. Long shallow marks ran front to back on the lower panel. Four parallel lines evenly spaced like fingers sprayed wide, dragged deliberate. Not deep enough to cut through to primer, but clear in the silver paint. Too straight for random branches, too uniform for rocks or accident. Started low near the rocker panel where you see if you were running crouched. Rose flight toward the handle. Like whatever made it had been eating pace beside the door, reaching up as it moved, viewing the truck the whole way. The lines overlapped in places like multiple paths, patient and thorough. I just stared a long time staring, coffee going cold in my hand. Washed the truck twice that week, scrubbed hard with soap and a soft brush, even tried to touch up paint from the auto store. Marks faded some but didn't vanish complete. Those lines you can still see as the lighting is bright. Told myself it was vandalism, maybe kids with keys sneaking out while I was parked in an overlook. Though no one around was locked that night and I hadn't stopped long enough. Dale asked about the drive when I called to check in later that week. I said it was fine, foggy in spots, nothing worth mentioning. I still drive the parkway plenty, can't avoid living here, but never alone after full dark if I have a choice. Take the interstate when I can, I'll wait in the morning. And I park on the driver's side, always down, back close to the house wall, porch light flooding the gap so nothing can approach on the scene. Some nights when the wind comes strong down off the mountain, I will the gutters just right. A wind bombs into me in the valleys. I swear I hear it. Soft, little unsettled. Bomb, patient, outside the passenger, whatever I'm driving. Waiting for the next long drive and down. Wait, roll the window down again. Don't forget to check the mirrors close enough. I don't look at that door much anymore, but the marks are still there. Faint under layers of wax and time. Like a reminder that something out there that fades along and on.
I've spent my whole life in these mountains, born in a little house outside Roanoke, where the New River cuts deep and the ridges rise up like walls, keeping the world out. The Blue Ridge Parkway's been my road since I could drive, taking it to work, to visit family scattered in the hollers, to clear my head when life got too loud down in the valleys. I know it better than most, every overlook, every tunnel, every stretch where the fog sits heavy or the deer freeze in your headlights like they're deciding whether to live or die. Folks up here grow up with stories, the kind told quiet around campfires or wood stoves, about things seen on those high roads after dark. Lights that follow but never pass, voices on radios that know your name, shapes in the trees that move wrong. I always listened polite, nodded, but figured most were just the mountains playing tricks on lonely minds. Until 10 years ago this past April, when something happened that still sits in me like a stone I can't cough up. I'd been down in Galax for a few days helping my cousin Leland rebuild his cabin after a pine came down on it during a March windstorm. The place is old, logs squared by hand sometime in the 1890s, set back on a ridge off the parkway near Fancy Gap, where the elevation makes the winters bite harder and the summers feel shorter. Leland's wife had left him a couple years before, taking the kids to Richmond, and he'd let the place go some, roof leaking, porch sagging, chimney cracked. We worked hard those days, jacking the corner beams, replacing rafters chewed by squirrels, laying new tin that rang loud under our hammers. Evenings we sat inside by the rebuilt fireplace, eating beans and cornbread, drinking coffee black as tar, talking about nothing heavy at first,
Hunting seasons past, the price of tobacco, family gossip. But as the fire burned low, Leland got quieter, staring into the flames like he saw something moving there. He mentioned hearing things at night since the tree fell, soft thumps on the roof that weren't branches, footsteps circling the cabin slow after he turned the lights out. Probably just settling, he said quick when he saw my face. Old places talk to themselves. I didn't push, but I checked the locks before bed and kept my boots close. I left on a Thursday evening, later than smart. Leland fed me a big supper, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, greens from his early garden, and we sat talking till the sun was gone. By the time I loaded my tools into the back of my old Tacoma and hugged him goodbye, full dark had settled and the temperature was dropping fast. He stood on the porch in his coat, lantern in hand, watching me turn around on the narrow track, calling out to drive careful and text when I got home to my place near Floyd. I promised I would, though I knew service would vanish soon as I climbed. The truck started rough in the cold, but caught, heater blowing slow warmth, radio pulling in the public station from Blacksburg faint but clear enough, some old-time string band music that felt right for the drive. The parkway was empty that night, the way it gets midweek in early spring, no tourists yet, locals staying close to home with mud season coming. I took it northbound, keeping steady at 40 where the road allowed, headlights cutting sharp through the dark. Fog started pooling in the low spots as I climbed, then at first, then thicker in the cuts where cold air sinks. I sipped coffee from the thermos Leland's wife had sent years ago, still good though she was gone, thinking about getting home to my own bed and maybe a beer before sleep. The moon was thin, stars sharp overhead when the clouds parted. I'd been driving close to 2 hours, somewhere past mile marker 170 near the Puckett cabin, when I felt the need to stop. Coffee running through me, and the rest area at Smartview came up, a small pull-off with picnic tables and a little cinder block bathroom building the Park Service keeps open year-round. I signaled out of habit, eased onto the gravel, parked close to the building under the one sodium light that buzzed faint orange. Truck idling, I grabbed my flashlight from the console, just in case, though the light worked, and headed inside. The bathroom was cold, concrete floor damp from earlier rain, mirrors fog some at the edges. I did my business quick, washed my hands in water icy from the pipes, staring at my face in the mirror, tired eyes, beard coming in gray early like my daddy's. As I dried my hands on my jeans, I caught movement behind me in the glass. Not the mirror, the dark window over the sinks reflecting the parking lot and my truck beyond. Someone was sitting in my back seat, clear as day. A shape, human, head and shoulders, right behind the driver's spot, turned slightly like they were watching the door, waiting for me to come back. My stomach dropped cold. I spun around fast, heart slamming, flashlight beam sweeping the empty room. Nothing. Door still closed, no sound outside. I stepped to the window, worked out direct, no shape in the cab, seat empty, tools scattered where I'd left them. Just my truck alone under the light, fog drifting slow across the gravel. I turned back to the glass, breath shallow. The reflection was normal now, truck empty, night beyond. No figure. I stood there long minutes, staring, telling myself it was fatigue, a trick of light and shadow, the angle wrong. But the image stuck sharp. Dark hair, pale face, sitting patient. I went out fast, boots crunching loud, flashlight sweeping the lot and tree line. Nothing moved. Truck locked. I checked twice before going in. I opened the doors one by one, back seat included, beam cutting into every corner. Empty, no footprints in the damp gravel but mine. I stood there longer than I should have, cold seeping through my coat, listening to wind high in the pines and the buzz of the light overhead. Finally climbed back in, locked up tight, pulled out slow. Check mirrors constant, rear view, sides. Nothing behind but empty road and fog. Told myself it was over, just my eyes playing games after long days working. But as I drove on, it started. Weight shifting behind me. Subtle at first. On left curves, a faint lean right, like someone bracing against the turn. Right curves, left. Not the tools, they were strapped or heavy enough not to move. Not the seat creaking. Something with mass, adjusting balance. I slowed, testing. The shift matched. Sped up, same. Every bend in the road, every sway. A presence responding quiet behind the seat. I didn't stop again, couldn't. The idea of pulling over, opening the back, shining light on empty space while feeling eyes on my neck was worse than driving. Fog thickened and thinned with elevation, but the weight stayed constant, patient, silent, riding with me mile after mile. I reached the higher stretches near Rocky Knob, then Meadows of Dan, then down toward Floyd. Hours blurred, checked mirrors till my eyes burned. Nothing visible, but the feeling never left. Weight settling when I braked, shifting forward slight on acceleration, always there. Only when the first gray of dawn started lightening the sky did it ease. As streetlights appeared and houses grew closer together, the presence faded gradual, like something to decide to get off quiet. I pulled into my driveway just after sunrise, sat long minutes with the engine running, watching the mirrors. Empty, went inside, didn't tell my wife the whole story. Just said the drive was long, foggy in spots. Slept uneasy that day. Never found marks or signs in the truck. Seat clean, no prints, no scent but pine and coffee. But I don't park at remote rest areas anymore. Don't stop after dark if I can help it. And on long night drives, I keep the rearview mirror tilted high or cover it with a jacket. Because some nights, when fog sits heavy or the curves come tight, I still feel it. Weight shifting gently behind me, patient, waiting for the next time I'm alone long enough to notice. I lock the doors now, check the back seat twice. But sometimes in the reflection of dark glass, store windows, passing cars, I catch a glimpse of something sitting there, head turned forward, riding quiet. Waiting till I look away.
I've lived in these mountains all my life. Born in a little house tucked in a holler near Boone, where the wind comes down off the ridges like it's got a grudge against everything standing, rattling the windows and moaning through the pines till you learn to sleep through it or go half mad. The Blue Ridge Parkway's been my road since I got my license at 16, driving it to high school when the buses couldn't make the icy back roads in winter, hauling lumber and shingles for work when I started framing houses, visiting family scattered from Blowing Rock to Cherokee, like seeds blown on the wind. I know it like my own heartbeat. Every curve that hugs the sheer drop-off with nothing but a flimsy guardrail between you and a 1,000-foot fall. Every overlook where you can pull over and feel the world fall away below while the clouds drift level with your boots. Every stretch where the trees lean in close enough to scrape the roof if you veer an inch off line. Folks up here grow up hearing stories about the parkway after dark, lights that follow but never pass, voices whispering from empty passenger seats, shapes seen in the fog that don't belong to deer or bear or anything with a natural explanation. I always listened polite around the wood stove or at deer camp, nodded when the old men told their tales, figured most were just loneliness wearing a mask or too much moonshine talking. But there's one night, 11 years ago this coming June, that sits heavy in me still, a weight I carry quiet most days, but feel sharp when the wind picks up or the fog rolls in thick. I don't speak of it much, because words make it feel closer, like inviting whatever it was back to finish what it started. I'd been down in Asheville for a few days helping my sister Marlene move out of the house she'd shared with her husband Ray before he ran off with some woman from Charlotte he'd met online. The place was small, a rental on the west side with a yard gone wild from neglect, porch sagging where the posts had rotted. Marlene's tougher than she looks, raised 3 kids mostly alone even before Ray left, but lifting dressers and mattresses down narrow stairs wore her down, and she couldn't manage the heavy stuff by herself. We worked long hours those days, sweat soaking our shirts even in the cool spring air, loading my truck bed high with furniture her kids had outgrown, boxes of books and dishes she didn't want but couldn't bear to throw away, clothes Ray had left behind that still smelled faintly of his cologne. We drove load after load to the dump or the storage unit she'd rented on the edge of town, the bed groaning under the weight, straps creaking as we took the curves slow. Evenings we sat on her porch drinking sweet tea or coffee depending on the hour, watching the sun drop behind the mountains while the kids, hers all grown and gone to their own lives, called to check in. We talked quiet about little things at first, recipes our mama used to make, the price of gas, how the dogwoods were blooming early that year. But as the light failed and the crickets started, conversation turned heavier, about Ray's leaving, how sudden it was, how Marlene had found the messages on his phone one night when he was in the shower. She didn't cry, not in front of me, but I saw the hurt in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching, the way she gripped her mug tighter when his name came up. I stayed longer than I meant to, an extra day, then another, making sure she was settled in the little apartment she'd found closer to her work, helping hang curtains and stock the pantry so she wouldn't come home to empty shelves. I pulled out late on a Saturday, later than smart, close to 9 by the time I hugged her goodbye on the apartment steps and promised to call when I got home. Sky was clear overhead, stars already pricking through sharp and cold, but clouds hung low on the western ridges promising rain or maybe thunderstorms higher up. She stood in the doorway with the light behind her, waving till I turned the corner onto the main road, reminding me to text even though we both knew service would die as soon as I climbed toward the parkway. My old Ford F-150 was running good despite the miles, loaded light now with just my tools rattling in the box and a cooler of leftovers she'd pressed on me, fried chicken, potato salad, cornbread wrapped careful in foil. Heater blowing steady warmth, radio pulling in the classic country station out of Johnson City faint but clear enough for company. I took the parkway northbound, figuring the quiet high road would do me good after the noise and dust of moving, let me unwind before facing my own emptied house, wife gone to visit her sister in Tennessee for the weekend, kids at college. The road was empty that night, the way it gets on weekends before real tourist season kicks in. No big RVs lumbering slow, no cyclists in packs, just the occasional local heading the opposite way, headlights flashing bright as they passed. I kept it steady, 55, 60 on the rare straights, windows cracked a couple inches for fresh air even though the night was cool and fast with elevation. Fog started gathering in the valleys as I climbed out of Asheville, thin wisps at first drifting across the asphalt like breath on glass, then thicker banks curling up from the French Broad River below. I sipped coffee from the thermos Marlene had filled before I left, black with a little sugar the way I like it, thinking about pulling over to sleep in the cab if the fog got bad but figuring I could push through to Boone or at least past the worst of it. I'd been driving maybe an hour and a half, somewhere past the Craggy Gardens area where the rhododendrons grow thick and wild, coming down a long grade where the road straightens rare and lets you open up a bit when I heard the first knock. It was soft but unmistakable, 2 taps, deliberate, right on the driver's side window, knuckle on glass, not a rock ping or branch scrape. Tap, tap, like someone outside asking polite to be let in or getting my attention. I jerked slight, foot easing off the gas, instinctive, truck slowing from 70 to 65, then 55 quick. Heart footed hard once, then settled. Checked the rearview mirror.
Nothing behind but empty black ribbon and fog swirling in my taillights. Side mirror same. Trees rushing by dark and close on the uphill side. Guardrail flashing silver on the drop. No car pacing close, no shape running level with the cab. I was doing 70 again by then. Wind loud through the crack. Road smooth and new paved on that stretch. I told myself it was a rock kicked up from my own tire, or maybe a big June bug smacking the glass. Happens sometimes in spring. Happens. Rolled the window up tight with a quick twist, turned the radio louder, Merle Haggard singing about fighting side by side with Mama, and kept driving, eyes front. A minute later, maybe less, coming into a gentle left curve where the driver's side swings toward the bank, it came again. Tap, tap, tap. 3 this time, same spot, middle of the window glass, clear as if the truck was parked at a stoplight. My heart slammed harder. I didn't look over, kept eyes locked on the white line snaking ahead, but I felt it, cold crawling up my neck like fingers. Slowed to 60. The knocking slowed too, deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. Sped back to 70. Tap, 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 quick again, light but firm. It wasn't debris. Debris doesn't pace you at speed, doesn't knock polite like someone wanting conversation or entry. The road curved sharper then, a series of S-bends dropping toward the folk art center, passenger side swinging toward the void, driver side toward the uphill bank thick with rhododendron and hemlock. The knocking kept steady, following the speed perfect, never missing. I tested it careful, eased to 55 on a curve post at 35, and it dragged slow. Tap, tap, tap. Floored it to 80 on the next straight, tires humming loud against asphalt, engine roaring, and it quickened without strain. Tap, 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 like knuckles running light along the glass from back to front, keeping up without effort, without breath, without footfalls I could hear over the wind. I never looked, couldn't make myself. The idea of turning my head slow, seeing something level with the window, pale in the dashboard glow, eyes fixed on me, running silent in the dark at 70 miles an hour, was worse than any imagination. Sweat beaded cold on my forehead and back despite the heater blowing hot. Fog thickened ahead sudden, headlights cutting shorter yellow cones, forcing me to low beams, but the knocking stayed clear, patient, intimate. Miles went by like that, tension building slow and relentless. I passed overlooks empty and black, gravel lots swallowed in mist, sides emerging sudden from the gray, past the tunnels near Craggy where the knocking echoed strange inside the concrete walls, amplified like it was inside the cab with me, past long grades where I pushed 90, 95 trying to outrun it, leave it behind in the curves, but it kept pace, neither angry nor hurried. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause, like conversation, like waiting for me to roll the window down or pull over or acknowledge it was there. I thought of pulling over hard, slamming brakes at the next wide spot, jumping out with the tire iron from under the seat, shining the flashlight into the dark and confronting whatever it was. But stopping felt wrong, giving it time to close the distance, to reach the door handle, to wait patient while I fumbled with locks. Thought of feral people, stories you hear whispered about folks gone wild in the backcountry, living off the land in hidden camps, watching the roads from laurel thickets, tapping on windows to spook drivers or draw them out, or worse. Or older things, legends the Cherokee told and the old Scots-Irish settlers carried over, shapes that run the high ridges at night, marking travelers who drive alone too late, claiming company for the dark. The knocking went on for what felt like hours, though the clock said less, 40 minutes, maybe 50, time stretching thick as the fog. Radio played songs I knew every word to but didn't hear, Johnny Cash, then Patsy Cline, voices distant like from another room. Every curve, every sway of the truck, I waited braced for the next tat, counting them sometimes without meaning to, 2, 3, 4, 5, like it was learning a pattern or teaching me one. I tried talking once, voice cracking in the quiet cab. What do you want? No answer but wind and engine. Tried the horn, long blast echoing off the rock cuts. The knocking paused, then resumed softer, almost amused. Tried praying under my breath, words my mama taught me as a child. Didn't help. The taps came coming, patient as death. Then sudden as it started, it stopped. Silence rushed in, heavy and complete. No more taps, just wind whistling through the sealed crack I'd forgotten, tires humming steady, my breathing loud and ragged in my ears. I slowed gradual to 60, waiting, half expecting it to start again harder. Nothing. Sped up cautiously to 70. Nothing. Drove steady through thinning fog as the road dropped lower, checking mirrors constant, no shape dropping away into the trees, no figure shrinking in the red glow of taillights. Relief hit me hard, unexpected like a punch. Tears came hot and sudden, blurring the dashed lines till I wiped them angry with my sleeve, cursing myself for a fool. Told myself it was fatigue after long days moving, adrenaline crashing, imagination fed by Marlene's loneliness and old stories. Kept driving, windows up tight now, radio off, listening for any sound outside normal. I reached Boone near 1 in the morning, streets empty, pulled into my driveway under the porch light my wife had left on timer. Sat long minutes with the engine running, watching mirrors front and side and rear, listening to the night settle. Nothing but wind in the pines across the road and a dog barking distant. Went inside quiet, drank water straight from the tap. Didn't sleep much that night. Next morning, sunlight clear and cold across the yard, frost glittering on the grass. I walked out to the truck slow, coffee mug smelling in my hand, dreading and needing to know what evidence the night had left.
The body was clean, road dust and a little mud from Asheville streets, passenger side normal, but the driver's window told the truth I'd known deep down. There, faint in the thin film of overnight dew and road gran, a handprint, palm center and 5 fingers spread wide, pressed flat from the outside, right in the middle of the glass where the knocks had landed over and over. Not smudged or streaked like accidental touch, no, deliberate, steady, like someone had leaned in close at 70 miles an hour, steadying themselves against the wind, leaving their mark clear. I stood there staring longer than I should have, coffee going cold. Watched the truck through.
I've lived in these mountains all my life, born in a little cabin outside Spruce Pine, where the Tow River runs cold and clear year-round, and the ridges rise up steep enough to block the morning sun half the day in winter, leaving the hollows in shadow till noon. The Blue Ridge Parkway's been part of me since I was a boy, riding shotgun in my daddy's old Dodge pickup, him pointing out the overlooks with one hand on the wheel and the other holding a cigarette, telling stories about the old days when the road was brand new and folks still walked the high trails to trade with neighbors miles away through thick laurel hills nobody cuts anymore. I know every twist of it from Linville clear up to Waynesboro, where the fog likes to settle thick and sudden in the hollows like it's hiding something, where the deer cross at dusk in herds like they own the asphalt, where the tunnels swallow your headlights and echo your engine back at you strange and delayed. Folks up here grow up hearing tales around a wood stove or a deer camp, lights that follow cars but never quite pass, footsteps circling cabins slow after the lights go out, voices on the wind that know your name when no one living is there to speak it. I always listened quiet, nodded along when the old men spun their yarns, figured most were just the loneliness of these high places talking through cracked voices or too much white lightning loosening tongues. But there's one night, 12 years ago this past September, that still wakes me sometimes in the dark hours, heart pounding hard enough to shake the bed, sheets tangled around my legs, the echo of that voice in my head like it never truly left the cab of my truck. I'd been over in Roanoke for a week helping my Uncle Vernon close up his hunting cabin for the coming winter. It's one of those old places built from hand-hewn chestnut logs before the blight took them all in the 30s, set back on a narrow ridge near Peaks of Otter, where the wind cuts sharp even in summer, and the nearest neighbor is a mile down a dirt track that turns to red mud when it rains hard. Vernon's getting on in years now, 83 that fall, knees gone bad from a lifetime falling timber and hauling logs, hands knotted with arthritis, but still strong enough to split kindling when he had to. He couldn't manage the heavy work alone anymore, boarding the windows tight against squirrels and bears that get bold come fall, draining the water pipes so they wouldn't burst in the first hard freeze, stacking the last of the seasoned oak and hickory under the lean-to out back. We worked steady those days, from the first gray light of dawn till the sun dropped behind the western ridges and the cold rushed in quick. Ate simple meals at a scarred pine table that had been there since Vernon built the place in the 50s. Venison stew thick with potatoes and onions one night, fried trout he'd caught in the creek below the ridge the next, cornbread baked in a cast-iron skillet on the wood stove, coffee strong enough to wake the dead and keep you going till dark. Evenings we sat close to the stove while it popped and settled, throwing sparks up the chimney like tiny stars escaping into the night. Vernon told stories like always, about hunts from 50 years ago when the deer were thicker and the bears bigger, about running moonshine in his younger days along back roads the revenuers never found, about strange things seen on the ridges after the sun went down, lights moving slow between the trees with no lantern or flashlight to explain them, calls that sounded almost human but came from too deep in the woods, footsteps on the tin roof some nights that weren't squirrels or raccoons because they walked upright and deliberate. He laughed some of them off with a gravelly chuckle, said it was just old man imagination or the wind playing tricks down the hollows, but I caught him checking the door locks twice before we turned in and keeping the .30-30 Winchester loaded by the door, even though bear season was still weeks away. One night, after a long day wrestling new tin on the back roof, he got quieter than usual, staring into the flames like he saw shapes moving there. "This land, don't forget, son," he said low, "holds on to things longer than we do." I nodded, didn't press, but the word stuck. I left later than I should have, on a Friday evening after Vernon fed me a big supper of fried trout fresh from the creek that morning, greens from the last of his garden, and cornbread still hot from the skillet. Sky was clear but already full dark when I stepped out, moon not risen yet, stars sharp and cold overhead, temperature dropping fast as clouds rolled in slow from the west promising rain or maybe the first snow flurries up high. He stood on the porch in his old wool coat and felt hat, lantern in one gnarled hand, watching me load the last of my tools into the bed of my Tacoma and tie the tarp down tight against the wind, pressing a brown paper sack of his smoked sausage links and a jar of chow chow his daughter had made on me, making me promise to call when I got home to my place near Spruce Pine. I told him I would, hugged him careful. He was thinner than I remembered, ribs sharp under the coat, though I knew cell service would vanish dead soon as I hit the main road. The truck started easy despite the chill creeping in, battery strong,
heater blowing warm air that smelled faintly of sawdust and coffee grounds. I pulled out slow, gravel crunching loud under the tires in the quiet, waving one last time as his lantern light shrank behind me in the rearview mirror, the cabin swallowed quick by the black wall of trees closing in like a curtain. The parkway was empty that night, the way it gets late on weekdays in early fall. No tourists lingering yet for the leaf color, no big RVs lumbering slow without estate plates, just the occasional local heading the opposite way, headlights flashing bright as they passed on the narrow lanes. I took it southbound, settling into the familiar rhythm of the drive. Windows cracked a couple inches for fresh air, even though the night was turning sharp with the elevation drop. Fog started gathering in the low spots as I wound down from peaks of otter, thin wisps at first drifting across the asphalt like breath on cold glass, then thicker banks curling up from the James River Valley below, swallowing the shoulders and making the headlights cut shorter yellow cones. I kept it steady, 55, 60 on the rare straights, sipping coffee from the thermos Vernon had filled before I left, black and bitter the way we both like it, thinking about getting home to my own wood stove and maybe a beer from the fridge before bed, my wife asleep and the house quiet. I'd been driving maybe an hour, somewhere past the turnoff for Bedford where the road climbs again and winds tight along the ridge above Abbott Lake, when your radio started acting strange. It was playing old songs I hadn't heard in years, one after another in perfect sequence. No commercials, no DJ chatter breaking in. First came 6 Days on the Road by Dave Dudley, the trucker song my daddy used to play loud on long hauls when I was a kid riding with him to deliveries, singing along off-key about seeing his baby soon. Then Long Black Veil, the haunting version by Lefty Frizzle that always made my mama tear up quiet when it came on, remembering her own brother lost young. Then Wreck of the Old 97, the train ballad Vernon had hummed absent while we worked that week, splitting wood or patching tin. Songs tied deep to memories I hadn't thought about in ages, playing seamless like someone had cued them deliberate from my own head. I smiled at first, figuring the station was running a classic country block or something fitting for a Friday night drive. Turned the volume up a notch, tapped the steering wheel along with the beat, feeling the familiarity settle comfortable. But as the miles rolled on and the fog thickened, the songs kept coming, deeper cuts, more personal. The Carroll County Accident by Porter Wagner, about a wreck that revealed hidden secrets, hitting me with the sharp memory of the night my best friend from high school wrapped his Mustang around an oak on a back road near Mitchell, drunk and running from a fight with his wife, dying alone before help came. Then Teddy Bear, the Red Sovine tearjer about a disabled boy calling truckers on the CB, reminded me painful of my own son when he was little, struck with a high fever one winter night I was away working, my wife calling scared while I raced home through snow. Songs I loved but hadn't heard played in years, let alone all together in one stretch. No static breaks, no station ID, just flowing perfect, like the dial was tuned to something inside me instead of out of Lynchburg. Between tracks, faint at first under the crackle of elevation static, a voice started speaking. Not a DJ announcing the next song. Male, low and calm, familiar in a way that raised the hairs on my arms and neck slow. It repeated worries I hadn't spoken aloud. Not to Vernon, not to my wife, not to anyone. Wonder if Marlene's really all right down there alone in that apartment, it said soft after Long Veil faded out, naming my sister and her fresh hurt from Ray leaving, like it had been sitting on the porch with us. Then after Teddy Bear ended with the boy's voice on the radio. Boy's growing fast. Missed his last ball game working late again, didn't you? My exact guilt from the week before, staying late on a job site to finish a roof before rain, missing my son's game and the disappointment in his eyes when I got home. I reached quick for the knob, twisted to scan stations, gospel preaching, then static, then a farm report, but the voice followed faint, overlaying whatever came through. Turned the volume down. Still there. Turned it off complete, knob clicking hard. Silence filled the cab sudden, broken only by the rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional sigh of wind through the cracked windows. But the voice continued. Softer now, closer, like someone sitting in the passenger seat or whispering from behind, direct into my ear instead of through the speakers. Getting late on the road. Should have left Vernon's before full dark. Fog's coming in thicker down the grade. My exact thought as I crested a ridge and saw mist pooling heavy ahead, swallowing the white line. Cold sweat broke on my forehead. I smacked the dash hard with my palm, yelled "shut up" into the empty cab. Nothing changed. The voice kept on, calm and knowing, naming regrets I carried quiet, about not staying longer with Vernon, who might not have many seasons left, worries about money with winter work slowing in construction, sorrow for sharp words to my wife the week before over nothing important, memories of my daddy's last days in the hospital bed I hadn't shared with a soul since the funeral. Songs I loved, but hadn't heard played in years, let alone all together in one stretch. No static breaks, no station ID, just flowing perfect, like the dial was tuned to something inside me instead of out of Lynchburg. Between tracks, faint at first under the crackle of elevation static, a voice started speaking.
Not a DJ announcing the next song. Male, low and calm, familiar in a way that raised the hairs on my arms and neck slow. It repeated worries I hadn't spoken aloud, not to Vernon, not to my wife, not to anyone. Wonder if Marlene's really all right down there alone in that apartment, it said soft after Long Veil faded out, naming my sister and her fresh hurt from Ray leaving, like it had been sitting on the porch with us. Then after Teddy Bear ended with the boy's voice on the radio, boy's growing fast. Missed his last ball game, working late again, didn't you? My exact guilt from the week before, staying late on a job site to finish a roof before rain, missing my son's game and the disappointment in his eyes when I got home. I reached quick for the knob, twisted to scan stations, gospel preaching, then static, then a farm report, but the voice followed faint, overlaying whatever came through. Turned the volume down, still there. Turned it off complete, knob clicking hard. Silence filled the cab sudden, broken only by the rhythmic hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional sigh of wind through the cracked windows. But the voice continued, softer now, closer, like someone sitting in the passenger seat or whispering from behind, direct into my ear instead of through the speakers. Getting late on the road. Should have left Vernon's before full dark. Fog's coming in thicker down the grade. My exact thought as I crested a ridge and saw mist pooling heavy ahead, swallowing the white line. Cold sweat broke on my forehead. I smacked the dash hard with my palm, yelled,
I've lived in these mountains all my life. Born in a little house down a gravel road outside of Maggie Valley, where the creek runs loud and restless in spring thaw, and the ridges crowd so close you can feel them pressing on the back of your neck, even on bright days. The Blue Ridge Parkway has been my road since I was old enough to reach the pedals with a cushion behind my back. Driving it to school when the yellow buses couldn't make the ice-slick switchbacks, hauling Fraser furs to sell in Asheville lots come December, visiting kin scattered in hidden coves where the mail only comes twice a week and the only way in is a track that washes out every hard rain. I know every mile of it like the lines etched in my own hands, every overlook where the view drops away sudden into blue nothing, every tunnel that swallows your headlights whole and spits them back delayed and strange, every curve where the guardrail's been replaced more than once from folks misjudging the fog or the ice or their own weariness. Folks up here grow up hearing stories about the parkway after dark, cars that follow but never quite pass, lights seen deep in the woods with no road or trail behind them, stretches where the miles don't add up right no matter how many times you drive them. I always listened quiet around the wood stove or at deer camp, nodded polite when the old man spun their yarns with coffee cups steaming in their hands. Figured most were just the dark and the quiet and the long empty miles playing tricks on tired minds, or maybe a little too much white lightning loosening tongues. But there's one night, 13 years ago this past November, that still sits in me heavy as a stone I can't cough up or pass. I don't speak of it much, because saying it out loud makes it feel like I'm still driving that stretch, waiting for the same scarred tree and the same dented guardrail to come around again, the odometer clicking miles that go nowhere. I'd been up near Mount Pisgah for a few days helping my cousin Roy fix the roof on his cabin after a big windstorm the month before took half the tin off and dropped a widowmaker pine across the back corner. It's one of those old places built from poplar logs in the 30s by Roy's granddaddy, set back on a narrow ridge where the wind comes straight off the balsams cold and mean, rattling the tin like it's trying to tear loose and fly away. Roy had taken a bad fall off the ladder trying to patch it temporary, cracked 3 ribs and busted his wrist when he landed on the frozen ground and couldn't manage the heavy work alone anymore. We spent 4 long days at it, stripping the rotten shingles down to the bare decking, laying new felt that smelled sharp in the cold air, nailing down fresh tin that rang loud under our hammers every time the wind gusted. We worked from the first gray light of dawn till the sun dropped behind the western peaks and the cold rushed in quick to fill the space it left. Ate simple meals at a table scarred from generations of knives and hot plates, pinto beans thick with ham hock one night, fried pork chops and mashed potatoes the next, cornbread baked in the cast iron skillet on the wood stove, coffee thick as mud and black as night. Evenings we sat close to the stove while it popped and settled, throwing sparks up the chimney like tiny warnings escaping into the dark. Roy told stories like always, about his daddy hunting ginseng in the secret coves when it was still worth real money, about running trout lines in the creeks below the ridge as a boy, about strange things seen on the parkway after the sun went down.
cars that seemed to disappear around the next curve with no turnoff taken, voices calling from empty pull-offs like someone lost and looking for a ride home, stretches of roads that felt longer some nights than they had any right to be. He laughed some of them off with a gravelly chuckle, said it was just the mountains talking to themselves when no one else was listening, but I caught him looking out the dark windows more than once when the wind picked up hard, like he expected to see a shape standing just beyond the circle of light from the porch bulb, waiting patient. I left later than I should have, on a Thursday evening after Roy fed me a big supper of fried pork chops and mashed potatoes, greens from the last of his garden before the frost took it, cornbread still hot and crumbly. Sky was clear overhead but already full dark when I stepped out, moon thin and low on the horizon, stars sharp and cold, temperature dropping fast as clouds moved in slow from the southwest, promising rain or maybe the first wet snow higher up. He stood on the porch in his old Carhartt coat and boots, lantern in one hand, watching me load the last of my tools into the bed of my old Chevy Silverado and tie the tarp down tight against the wind that was starting to gust, pressing a brown paper sack of his smoked ham slices and a jar of his wife's apple butter on me, making me promise to text when I got home to my place near Waynesville. I told him I would, hugged him careful, ribs still tender and wrist in a brace, though I knew cell service would drop dead soon as I hit the parkway. The truck started rough in the cold, battery turning slow but caught on the third try, heater blowing lukewarm air that smelled of sawdust and coffee grounds. I pulled out slow, gravel crunching loud in the stillness, waving one last time as his lantern light shrunk behind me in the rearview mirror, the cabin's single window glowing yellow for a moment before the trees closed in and swallowed it whole. The parkway was empty that night, the way it gets midweek in late fall. No tourists lingering yet for the holiday lights or the first color change. No big RVs lumbering slow with Florida plates, just the occasional local heading the opposite way, headlights flashing bright as they passed on the narrow lanes. I took it southbound, planning to drop down past the Pista Inn, closed for the season now, and take the exit near Wagon Road Gap that leads to the back way home, shorter than the interstate and quieter. Kept it steady, 55, 60 on the rare straights. Windows cracked a couple inches for fresh air even though the night was sharp with the coming cold. Fog started gathering in the low spots as I descended from the higher elevations, thin wisps at first drifting across the asphalt like breath on a mirror, then thicker banks culling up from the valleys below, swallowing the shoulders and making the headlights cut shorter yellow cones that bounced back off the mist. I sipped coffee from the thermos Roy had filled before I left, black with a little sugar the way I like it, thinking about getting home to my own wood stove crackling and maybe watching whatever game was on late before bed, my wife likely asleep already with the dog at the foot. I'd been driving maybe 40 minutes, past the inn where the parking lot sat dark and empty, past the turnoff for the Arboretum, coming down a long series of sweeping curves where the road hugs the ridge tight with drop-offs on one side and rock cuts on the other when I first noticed the tree. It was a big eastern hemlock, old and heavy, leaning out over the guardrail on a sharp left curve, lower branches drooping almost to the asphalt, one thick limb scarred white where bark had been stripped years ago, maybe a truck mirror catching it, maybe something worse sliding too close to the edge. The guardrail right beside it had a deep dent, rusted through now, shaped like a vehicle had kissed it hard but somehow stayed on the road instead of going over into the dark below. I'd seen that tree and that dent 100 times driving the stretch over the years, marked it in my mind as a spot to slow extra for black ice in winter or wet leaves in fall, a reminder to keep right and pay attention. I took the curve careful, fog swirling thick around the truck, headlights catching the pale scar on the trunk and the crumpled metal of the rail clear as day. Eased through it, accelerated gentle on the short straight after, odometer clicking steady. I'd zeroed the trip meter at Roy's cabin like I always do for longer drives, watching it climb slow, 23,457.7 to 0.8 to 0.9. 10 minutes later, maybe 12, coming down another grade with a couple gentle bends, the same curve came up again. Same hemlock leaning heavy, same scarred limb, same rusted dent in the guardrail catching my lights exact, fog swirling the same pattern. My foot eased off the gas instinctive, truck slow into 50, then 45. Heart gave one hard thud like it skipped a beat. I told myself I'd zoned out, missed a turn or something, let my mind wander thinking about home and let the road fool me. But the parkway doesn't loop like that. No side roads here, no circles, just the one long road south. I kept driving, eyes glued now, watching for the next landmark I knew, the small pull-off with the stone wall and the view toward Cold Mountain when the air's clear. It came, then the short tunnel where water drips from the ceiling even in drought, then the big rock cut where the road narrows sudden and the drop is sheer on the right with no rail for a stretch. All familiar, all right where they should be. But 15 minutes after that, the same hemlock curve came around again. Scar white in the headlights, dent rusted familiar, fog curling the same way across the lane. I slowed to 30, heart thudding steady now, palms sweating on the wheel. Checked the odometer, trip meter, 23 miles already, when I knew from memory the drive home should have been closer to 40 total from Roy's. Main odometer climbing normal, no malfunction light. Gas gauge dropping steady. I kept driving, telling myself it was fatigue after long days roofing, eyes playing tricks in the fog, mind filling in patterns were non-existent, but the landmarks repeated exact. The pull-off with the stone wall, the dripping tunnel, the rock cut, then the hemlock curve again, and again, and again. The dread built slow, creeping like the fog itself. At first denial, just tired, just the
the dark, then bargaining, speeding up to 70, 80 on straights, trying to break the loop, slowing to 30, watching coast for any difference. Nothing changed. The same tree scarred the same dent rusted through, the same signs emerging from mist at the same moments. Miles added impossible, trip meter at 50, then 70, then 100, numbers I knew couldn't be real for the distance home, but the tank dropped with them, needle falling steady toward empty. Panic rush cold in my gut, running out of gas, looping endless, truck dying slow on the shoulder, me trapped walking the same stretch forever in the dark, body found weeks later on a road everyone knew was only 30 miles end to end. I talked to myself at first, voice low, keep calm, it's fog, it's mind tricks, then louder, angry, cursing road, the truck, Roy for keeping me late, myself for not leaving at dawn, tried the radio for company, static mostly, then faint stations fading in and out of the same spots every loop, songs repeating like a broken record. Hours blurred, time meaningless when miles lie. The fog never lifted complete, headlights always cutting the same ghostly tunnel. No other cars, no ranger trucks, no headlights ahead or behind ever. Just me and the road folding back on itself, gentle but relentless. Thoughts turned darker the longer it went, memories surfacing unbidden. My daddy dying sudden on this same road years before, heart attack at the wheel, truck found nosed into a guardrail not 5 miles from that dented spot. Mama's funeral the winter after, driving this stretch in snow to bury her beside him. My own boy, grown now, but the fight we'd had the week before over nothing important, words I wished back. The repetition ground deeper with every pass, proved the world had slipped somehow, that I was caught in something the mountains held onto, a pocket where the road refused to let go. I don't know how long it lasted, 3 hours, 4, 5, the clock lying same as the miles, trip meter past 200 when I couldn't take the silence and the looping quiet anymore. I screamed. Raw, loud, tearing out of me like something buried deep, breaking loose. Words at first, let me go, let me out, then just sound, animal and desperate, echoing in the cab, throat raw by the end. The road changed. Sudden as a snap. Fog parted ahead clean, headlights cutting clear asphalt new and unfamiliar for a heartbeat, then familiar in a different way. The next curve tighter, leading down sharp toward lights I recognized glowing in the valley. The exit for Wagon Road Cab, my turn home minutes away now. I took it fast, tires squealing on the damp pavement, heart slamming against ribs like it wanted out. Dropped down the winding access road, past familiar barns and mailboxes, into my driveway under the porch light left on timer, gravel popping loud under the tires like nothing had happened. Sat long minutes with the engine idling, hands shaking on the wheel, watching mirrors for any sign of fog creeping down behind. Nothing. Clear stars overhead, cold night ordinary. Next morning, sunlight cold and sharp across the frost on the grass. I walked out slow with coffee steaming in my hand, dreading and needing to see. Trip meter zeroed clean, like the truck hadn't moved an inch all night. Main odometer unchanged from Roy's cabin. Tank still showed 3/4, same as when I left. I still drive the Parkway, daytime mostly with my wife or a friend when I can, taking the long way around when fog warnings come on the radio. But I never take that stretch alone after dark anymore. And when the mist sits heavy in the valleys or the curves come too familiar too quick, I check the odometer more than the road ahead. Because some nights, parked safe in my own drive with the engine cold, the trip meter clicks forward slow. 1 mile, 2, 3, though the truck hasn't left the gravel. Waiting quiet for the next time I need the high road late. Waiting to pull me back into the loop it never really let go.